It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
What's up, everybody? One-on-one, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Glad you could join us this evening. Jackson Heil, Andrew Galata here with you. Super Bowl Sunday is about an hour away, folks. It's got to be very, very exciting for everyone. And it's been quite a storyline-driven week this past week, obviously with Chiefs-Bucks happening on Sunday, Brady, Mahomes. Everything's going to be really exciting. We're going to break it all down, but Andrew, how you doing, brother? It's been a little while.
I'm doing good, yeah. I feel like, look, Super Bowl Sunday, as a huge football fan, probably my favorite sport to watch. Nothing else you can ask for besides my Saints being in the game, so I'm upset about that, seeing the Bucks are in it. But, hey, this is the matchup I think the NFL wanted. You got Mahomes, who's the young gun. You got Brady, who, has all the rings, obviously the GOAT, I think you could all say. But, again, it should be a great matchup, and definitely looking forward to it.
I'm certainly looking forward to it as well. And Andrew, I think what's interesting about this Super Bowl is usually I get sick of all the storylines right now. Like this is the time where I'm just like, just play the damn game already, man. Like I'm sick of hearing about all the headlines, all the storylines that go on throughout these past 2 weeks. But I think this is the first time, and this may just be because of the pandemic, and I appreciate sports a little more than I used to. Even though I've always had an appreciation for sports because it's literally all I do. For some reason, I'm not sick of it this year. Like I'm actually like, I'm like geared up to talk about this today. And I'm like, all right, like we want to talk about Brady Mahomes again. I'm down. Like, let's do it. I'm excited for it. And that's the first time I think I could say that in a while, because usually I'm just like, by like Monday of the second week, I'm done with like hearing about all the news and stuff. I just want them to play the game, but I'm ready to talk about this. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, also I think this year you had like the Matt Stafford trade the first week, so I think that took a lot of things away until at least this week. And I don't know, I mean, you talk about maybe the last time Mahomes and Brady face each other, and again, these two guys, it's kind of, I guess, the changing in the wing here and just kind of moving over from Brady to Mahomes as, I mean, that's kind of how it's looking, and that's the storyline. And again, if you could really take it all in, like this is the last time that these two guys will be on the field together. It's definitely a lot to talk about.
Certainly is. And I mean, remember the first time they met in the postseason, it was epic. It was really epic. I mean, at Arrowhead, game went down to the wire, went to overtime, and Brady comes out on top, leading an excellent drive in overtime to win that game. And then they met this year is what I meant to say. They met this year in week 12, was it? It was week 12 when Chiefs go up big early. Tyreek Hill goes nuts in the first quarter. And they end up holding on after looked like Tampa Bay maybe was able to get back in the game. But the Chiefs hold on the road, and they're going to have to do it again in Tampa Bay, taking down the Bucs. First ever Super Bowl where a team is playing in its home stadium, which is quite an interesting storyline, which is weird without a ton of fans able to be there, but still a storyline nonetheless, and it's one we'll get to. But we appreciate you all for joining our simulcast today, whether it's on 90.7, whether it's on stream. We appreciate you guys for joining us. We got a great show ahead and a lot to get to in addition to the Super Bowl. We'll bring Kayla Wenzel in a little later. And some interesting news this week, yesterday specifically, in the baseball world, which we will talk about. Trevor Bauer to the Dodgers, Marcell Ozuna back to the Braves. We'll break that all down after we talk about the Super Bowl in the first hour. But we're talking Super Bowl. We're talking MLB. That'll take up the first hour of the show. And then we open up the second hour of the show with an interview we did earlier today. Zach Braziller, college hoops reporter for the New York Post. I love talking about college basketball, Andrew. I think it was pretty obvious with the variation of questions I asked him. And, I mean, he begged us to stay on to talk about Fordham basketball too, which it was pretty cool. But a lot of good stuff there and a lot of good content involving the Big East and college basketball as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at the calendar today. It's February 6th. I mean, March is coming up. I mean, who would have thought? Because it's just this crazy season in college basketball where nothing's really got going really until January. So it's going to be March right before we know it.
It really is. And we got to talk to him about a lot of stuff involving what the tournament might look like, potential coaching hires for Fordham, all that. We got to all of it. And that's at 12 o'clock, and that'll open up our second hour. Then we'll dive into some NBA talk because really weird night in Brooklyn yesterday with Kevin Durant. He doesn't start the game because of potential contact tracing issues. Somehow he ends up in the game. And then in the beginning of the third quarter, they're like, oh, no, you're coming out. You can't play the rest of the game. I mean, he tweeted out, free me, at about 9:53 last night as the Nets were en route to a loss against the Raptors. But we'll talk about that because that was a whole weird sequence. I didn't even know what to make of it, Andrew, personally. Like, I'm watching that game, and you see Kevin Durant on the sideline, and, like, how do you not just either stop the game at that point or just let him play? Like, the damage is done one way or another. I think you can't just take one player out in that situation. It's either you pump the brakes on the entire operation or you just let Durant play the second half.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it was like. They kept playing. It was like the weirdest thing. Like if you're going to take him out, you realize he was playing in that game. And even if he was on the bench, like he didn't start the game, but he was still on that situation is just, I mean, I guess it's just like it's 2020, 2021 now in this COVID situation. And basketball is interesting. It's like, again, they had the great bubble and it all worked out. And then this regular season started shaky. So that's definitely something to talk about.
Certainly is. And we'll get to that middle of our second hour. And then Alex Kennedy, Chief Content Officer for basketballnews.com. That'll come around 12:45. We had a great conversation with him yesterday about all things NBA, diving into potential trade scenarios for Bradley Beal. We did everything, and that was me and Alex Woles, who's our producer, our excellent producer, by the way, who got to talk with him yesterday. So a lot of stuff to get to on the NBA front there. Bradley Beal, LeBron James' continued greatness. I mean, we really talked everything with him. So excited for you guys to hear that conversation. That'll close out our second hour of the show, and then we'll bring Kayla back in for another headline segment, talking NFL. Not Super Bowl, though. We're going to focus on some quarterback stuff. Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, where those guys may end up next year. Some other quarterbacks we'll certainly get to. Deshaun Watson, obviously, being a big storyline. So that'll open up our third hour. And Kayla will stay with us for our final segment, and that's when we will dive into some of our favorite Super Bowl traditions, our favorite prop bets for the Super Bowl. And then, of course, we will get to our picks as well for what will transpire on Sunday. But, Andrew, before we really wrap up this rundown and go into the rest of our show, so many weird things happened during the Super Bowl. I mean, you look at, like, every prop bet imaginable, and it's just like, my biggest question is, who thinks of this stuff? Like it's crazy because, like, it shouldn't be as popular as it is, but it attracts everyone. Like if you don't have to watch football to be interested on whether the coin toss is going to be heads or tails, or what the first song from The Weeknd is going to be at halftime. Like, it's just crazy how many directions they go in. And I think it's something definitely worth talking about because part of the big attraction for the Super Bowl is the gambling side of it, whether you're doing it through a legal sports book or whether you're just making some side hustles with your friends. I think one of the big attractions for the Super Bowl, in addition to the food, of course, is the way people gamble on the Super Bowl. And I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, the Super Bowl is a spectacle. I mean, it really is. I mean, between gambling, food, commercials, all that stuff. And, you talk about the betting. There's even betting on commercials and, like, which Anheuser-Busch commercial is going to come on first and, like, all this stuff. And just, like, my thing is, like, with the coin toss, I mean, the 50-50, obviously, like, why would people bet on that? Like, it makes no sense. Go to a slot machine, and at that point, I mean, it's pure luck. That's the thing that at least I don't understand. Or, I mean, the Gatorade, like, what's going to come out when they dump it on the winning coach, which I think red could be good this year just because both teams are red. That's just a sneaky prediction.
Well, you'll find out why people bet on the coin toss in about 2.5 hours, because I'll give you my reasoning behind it. But again, that's all to come. It's going to be a really exciting show. Our Super Bowl preview, diving into a lot, though. We're not even just getting to Super Bowl, like we mentioned. College basketball, NBA, other NFL stuff, and baseball. It's going to be a really exciting show. I'm glad you guys can all join us here on 90.7 FM, our YouTube live page as well. Lots to get to. And again, it's never enough time to do it, but we're going to try to get to all of it in these next 3 hours. But we're opening up with Super Bowl talk. First, we'll take a quick break here on One-on-One.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Just getting started here on One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Jackson Isle, Andrew Gulata, breaking down everything you need to know about Super Bowl Sunday. It's going to be a big one. Chiefs and Bucks in Tampa Bay. We'll talk about that storyline. We're talking about everything, but before we get into it all, Andrew, I'm curious where your head's at about, I want to say about 12 to 14 hours before kickoff. Where's your head at with this game right now?
I think it's going to be a great game. And I mean, I feel like as much as it pains me to say it, I do think the Bucks actually match up well against the Chiefs, which is actually kind of interesting. I do. I think the defense for the Bucks matches up well. Just so it's kind of what the Chiefs try to do, especially with guys like Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. And I think that defense, and especially those linebackers, have enough to muddy the field, definitely disrupt Kelce. To me, the big question would be Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill went off the last time these two teams played. And I could see him going off again. But, I mean, if you're Bruce Arians, you can't let him go off. Let someone else beat you. And I feel like for me, I think the Chiefs, they're going to put up their 30 points. But if you can hold them, like, I think if this game gets into a shootout, there's no way Mahomes loses to Brady. No way. But I feel like if this Bucs defense could come in there and disrupt Mahomes, I think you could see a close game.
What's interesting to me about this matchup is, to be honest, I think it's a weird matchup on defense because I think you're right in saying that Tampa Bay defensively is an interesting matchup for Kansas City because of their ability to take away the middle of the field. But at the same time, like, we saw what the Chiefs can do outside the hash marks
Yeah.
with Tyreek Hill in that first match. I mean, he went nuts. And listen, they adjusted after the first quarter. They really were able to find a way to take away Tyreek Hill after that point. But again, the damage was done to them.
Yeah.
So
Like
it
it was
didn't really
280
matter.
yards or something.
He had 208
I played him
yards
in
the
fantasy
first
that
quarter.
week too. Like, I mean,
I promise you weren't the only one. It was painful. I've had, while we're on the topic of that real quick, I had some horrible matchups in fantasy. My championship, I went up against Kamara when he had that explosion. I still won, by the way. So shout out to Evan Janikin, our former video guy who couldn't take me down even with Alvin Kamara. I'm thankful for having Devontae Adams that week. But I think it's an interesting matchup because I think for a while I wasn't convinced that Todd Bowles could win without blitzing a ton. And I think what we've really discovered over the latter half of the season, and especially in the postseason, was that Tampa Bay has been able to win with a 4-man rush. Yeah. And a lot of that has been because of what Shaq Barrett and JPP have been able to do. I mean, you look at the matchup against Green Bay, and I mean, it wasn't these crazy blitz packages that you usually expect from Todd Bowles, and what we really saw a lot of in New York when they didn't have elite edge rushers. It was, listen, we're going to keep it very simple. We're going to try to make Rodgers make plays against cover 2. And even when they played man-to-man coverage, it didn't really matter all that much because he didn't have enough time to make plays. And that is where this matchup gets interesting to me because obviously with Kansas City missing both their starting offensive tackles, specifically Eric Fisher, who tore his Achilles in the AFC Championship game, that's where this matchup gets dicey, I think, for Kansas City, because can they find a way to slow down Shaq Barrett and JPP? It's a question I don't really know the answer to, but I also think it's important to acknowledge that I don't even know if it matters because Patrick Mahomes' ability to escape the pocket and make plays with his legs makes him unstoppable for a lot of reasons. And we've seen him do it in various situations this year, but I'm not going to say pressure makes Mahomes better, but there's not a better quarterback, maybe not in NFL history, at handling pressure than Patrick Mahomes. And I'm curious to see what Mahomes is going to be able to do freelancing against his Tampa Bay defense, because I think he's going to have to do it a lot. And for that reason, I like Kansas City because I think he's going to be able to excel in that regard when you get him outside the pocket and when he's allowed to make plays with his legs. Will the pressure catch up to him at some point? I'm not sure. And I think that's a question we're all waiting to be answered this Sunday. But I think that's probably the most interesting storyline to me because, listen, I lied before when I said I'm not sick of storylines. I'm sick of the Brady Mahomes storyline because I'm so sick of trying to realize and trying to figure out how Brady duped us again and how we got to yet another Super Bowl. But to me, probably the most influential storyline is, can Tampa Bay get enough pressure on Patrick Mahomes? And not enough pressure, I should say, but can they take advantage of their pressure on the edge against Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest thing. And their front seven's so good. I mean, right now, JPP's playing like he's got 10 fingers again. Let's just put that out there. He's playing outstanding. He's playing like at that level like he was with the Giants, especially in the postseason, and what they're able to do with Levante David. Devin White has gotten a lot better throughout the season, and he's a guy that's between him and David, they're just roaming around the field. You have Ndamukong Suh's up front there as well, Vita Vea. I mean, and then Shaq Barrett, who, again, like that front seven's so good. And I go back to the Saints game against the Chiefs where the Saints ended up losing, but that was mostly to do with their offense. And I thought the Saints defense played outstanding. They got constant pressure on Mahomes. And you're right, Mahomes is going to make plays. Mahomes always makes plays. He'll put up your 30 points. But again, like, can you stop him to not score 38, 40 points? That's just kind of where I'm at. And it's going to be very interesting because that offensive line, like they're coming in here, 4 offensive linemen out from the beginning of the season. When you look at their starting 5 week 1, completely different now. And that's something to see if Mahomes can get the time. But I mean, he's the best at improvising. He's the best at making plays. And that's why he's going to put up 30 points. Basically, we just know that going in, which is just insane. And then you add in the weapons, you add in Andy Reid. But that's definitely an amazing matchup. And it's something to look at. And if I'm the Chiefs, I try to get some short passing in there. Like, to me, Tyreek Hill, Like, they're going to be so scared of that deep ball. Give Tyreek Hill some short passes, get him in space, let him run. I think that could be a really good formula for them.
And that's what Andy Reid does so well, too. I mean, he
Exactly.
finds ways to get the ball to his playmakers regardless of scheme defensively. I mean, we know based on the first matchup, and I don't like to put a ton of stock into a regular season matchup when two teams have played before, but we know from the regular season matchup in week 12 that you're not going to see a whole lot of man-to-man coverage. I mean, we saw what Carlton Davis was unable to do against Tyreek Hill in the first 15 minutes of that game. And just from that, we know we're not going to see a whole lot of man coverage. We're going to see a lot of zone, a lot of cover two, try to force Hill into these gaps in the zone. But what's really interesting about Kansas City is that they have maybe the best guy at finding gaps in the zone on offense, and that's Travis Kelce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if there's a better guy in the NFL right now than knowing the soft spots in the zone. And listen, I think, like you said, getting the ball out quick for Mahomes is going to be very important because of the pressure that he's probably going to see in this game. And whether it's Kelce, who I think is going to have a big impact in this game, even with the way Tampa Bay does a really good job defending tight ends, Kelce's going to have to do a good job. But like you mentioned, I think Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy become all that more important in this game because they have to find ways to get the ball to Tyreek Hill in space and get the ball to McCole Hardman in space. And one of the ways they're going to do this, I think, and listen, it's no secret because they've done it all year. And I think I mentioned this on NFL Friday yesterday, and Dan Orlovsky and Mina Kimes do a great job of breaking this down. And better than I will do for sure. But both of these teams love to utilize motion and in different ways. And that's one of the ways that Kansas City likes to get their ball to their playmakers. I mean, they use a lot of motion at the time of the snap. They love to get Hardman moving around the line. They love to get Tyreek Hill a running start, which I think is very important when you have two guys that are as fast as they are. Tampa Bay does it the opposite way. They like to do a lot of pre-snap motion to allow Brady to identify defensive because, listen, I think Steve Spagnuolo has done a really good job for Kansas City defensively, but one of the ways I think that Brady's going to have to be able to adjust to what we saw in week 12 was being able to identify coverage early. And I think we're going to see a ton of motion from Tampa Bay. And to me, the advantage goes to Tampa Bay in that regard because you're able to see disguised coverage better in film when you've played a team already than having to go in dry, essentially, because you know what type of coverage you're seeing, you know what type of offense you're playing. And I think that's going to be another interesting storyline to watch is how these teams utilize motion and how defensively Steve Spagnuolo and Todd Bowles try to change their disguises from the first matchup. Because, listen, I mentioned before that I'm not a fan of really looking back at this first matchup, but I think the way these two teams play, I think the tape from that first game is really important. The result doesn't mean much. The result means nothing at this point. But I think the tape from those first matchups for those 60 minutes, I think is critical to how these teams are going to adjust going forward. And I think it's something we're going to realize. It may take a little while in the first half because these teams are going to want to save things for the second half. But I think it's going to be something that we really see in big spots in this game, how they adjusted from the first matchup. And both sides need to do it too.
No, exactly. And I don't know, especially for the Bucs. I mean, Todd Bowles, I think coming into this playoffs, I mean, you said it, they blitz a ton. And then it really started in that Saints game. They didn't blitz a lot. They got to Breeze threw the 3 interceptions. They do the exact same thing against Rodgers. They win that game as well. We'll see if they can do it against Mahomes and that. But to me, I think Mahomes will then adjust. I think Andy Reid will then adjust. And they're just so talented at what they do. And again, I have a hard time going up against Patrick Mahomes and, those guys and what they're doing. But I think that matchup is really good, for the Bucs. And I think it's interesting to look at what they're doing with their front seven, and their back end's going to have to step up too. I think their safeties are going to have to play really good, more than just hit hard, because that's what they're known with Winfield and those guys, and force fumbles. They're going to have to range over, make plays on Tyreek Hill, deep plays, help over the top. They're going to have to do that. And again, I think that's another interesting thing. And the thing, I think, moving over to the Bucks on offense and what they're doing, I think running the ball for them is very important. I mean, if Leonard Fournette can continue this and play well, and he's got 3 touchdowns, 14 catches, over 300 yards all purpose. If he could run the ball well and I think leave that pocket open for Brady, I mean, if he has time to pick you apart, it's at that point, it's good luck. I mean, and I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball, which is why I think the Chiefs will have some success. But if they can run play action, get Brady some time, I mean, he's going to pick you apart, boom, 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 for sure.
He will. And I think I struggle to see Tampa Bay winning this game with their offense. I mean, I think everyone does at this point. But let's be honest with ourselves here. I mean, Brady was horrific in the second half against Green Bay. And that might be underselling it, because the only reason the Packers were in that game was because of the turnovers that were caused by Tom Brady. And they were bad ones. I mean, they were some really bad ones. I mean, first one throwing into double coverage. The second one, he airmails Mike Evans on what was probably going to be setting up a 1st and goal at that point that would have iced the game, essentially. And then he just throws a moon ball on 3rd down with edge pressure coming from the defensive back. And that really allowed Green Bay to have some hope. I mean, they couldn't take advantage. And credit to Tampa Bay's defense, because they were faced with a lot of difficult situations in that game against the MVP and Aaron Rodgers this year. And every time they stepped up to the challenge. And listen, a lot of credit deserves to go to their edge rushers, but I mean, their secondary was awesome, I thought, against Green Bay. And listen, I was not a fan of the officiating in that game for a lot of reasons, and that may just because I bet on the Packers. But I think what's really interesting to watch in this game, too, is how the officials decipher what defensive holding is, because we saw in the Green Bay, Tampa Bay NFC Championship game, defensive holding didn't exist for 58 minutes until Desmond King holds Ty Johnson and he has the flop of the year and Tampa Bay goes back to the Super Bowl. I don't know if Tampa Bay is going to be able to get away with it. And I think that especially when you have to go up against weapons like Tyreek Hill, like McCole Hardman, like Sammy Watkins, if he's able to play. He's questionable at the moment, but I think he's going to play. And then Travis Kelce, of course, who gets held pretty much every time he runs a route. I'm curious to see how the officials decide to go with this game, because in the past that wasn't the case 2 weeks ago. And I think it was a big reason why the outcome was the way it was. I mean, the Murphy Bunting interception was a clear hold. Let's not
that guy
make any
holds.
mistake about it.
Just for that guy holds. So he holds every play. I mean, in the Saints game, he holds every play, which, like, especially as a Saints fan, because the Saints hold a lot too. Like, I'm fine with that, but then don't call the penalty at the end of the game. That was awful.
Listen, I was talking with Nick DeLuca about this on NFL Friday a few weeks ago, actually last week. And I think he brought up an interesting point, because I usually am one to say let him play. But what was interesting that he said is the rules are the rules for a reason. And it's a very simple statement, but it's true. Like, defensive holding is in there for a reason. Now, I have sympathy for defensive backs, because I think it's impossible to play defense now in this league, because everything gets called, which is why I guess I was leaning on the side of let him play. But when you officiate a game like that for 58 minutes and then basically change everything for one play, you set a precedent for the way to play defense in that game. Is, listen, we're going to let you hold, we're going to let you scratch, we're going to let you do everything. And then you completely change that on one play, and it decides the Super Bowl. And listen, Green Bay deserved to lose for a lot of reasons other than that. But, I mean, in that moment, that is the game. And that's why I'm really fascinated to see if the officials got notice of this before the game starts. Because when you have explosive weapons like Kansas City has, and even on the Tampa Bay side, when you have the weapons that they have in Mike Evans, who is a physical monster, Chris Godwin, who's been terrific, who I think is the X factor on offense for Tampa Bay, Gronkowski, obviously. The list goes on and on. Antonio Brown, if he plays. I think it's a storyline that deserves a lot more attention than it's getting, because I think it was a massive reason for why things went the way they did in the NFC Championship game. It wasn't really a factor in the AFC because I thought it was actually a pretty well officiated game.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that we're going to find out early and often. And if they are going to call stuff, like if they're going to call everything, like I think they probably should, that's advantage Kansas City. No doubt in my mind, because of the way they can utilize their weapons and the way Mahomes can stay in the pocket and extend plays. You got to guard for a long time when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes, and one holds and one pass interference can change an entire game.
No, yeah, and I feel like, I don't know. I feel like, especially with Brady and how the Bucs play, I think they're going to let him hold. I don't know, but that's just how I think they play. They play physical. I think they will, and especially because it's Tom Brady, and we know he gets his calls, and we know at the end of the game, like that's why that call by LaFleur was so, to me, just awful, because you knew if there was any chance that Brady was going to get to convert that third down, it was going to happen. Like, you can't be surprised if you're the Packers. Like, oh, you can even complain about the penalty because you had all the chances in the world. Like, and I think that, yeah, and that's probably going to happen again. I just think, like, yeah, I think it will definitely affect them just because the Chiefs love to throw the ball downfield. But again, they'll probably, I mean, if it's a very egregious, obviously they're going to call it. And I think Tyreek Hill, just to how he plays, he may force some egregious penalties because he's just so fast. And you put him on, like, I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to play a ton of zone, and they're going to try to take out that deep ball just because you have to be so scared. Like, if you're Bruce Arians, you cannot let Tyreek Hill or Todd Bowles, you can't let Hill win this game because he won that game for them, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. You can't let that happen again. And I don't know. I don't think they're going to put it in the refs' hands to say, oh, let's try to hold. And I don't know. That's just something, like, definitely the refs, and they'll be on Brady's side because they always are. But again, I feel like it won't be a huge storyline. I just think Patrick Mahomes, like, even if they hold and stuff, he's a magician. I mean, he's that good. Like, there's some plays where you just go, tip your cap. Like, that's what it is. And it's going to happen on Sunday for sure.
I love having someone who shares my disdain for Tom Brady.
Oh, my God.
It really is nice. I mean, listen, as a Jets fan, I saw it for years and years on this side. And now you're getting a taste of it as a Saints fan, having to deal with it when you play Tampa Bay twice a year and 3 times this year and ultimately ended your season. But, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, listen, I'm very open that I have a hatred towards Tom Brady just because of all the pain he has caused. And listen, I respect his talent.
Oh,
like,
I do too.
There's no doubt about it. Like, he is the greatest of all time. I'm not saying he's the most talented of all time, but he is the greatest of all time. With that said, I think he's been completely bailed out this year. And I think the biggest thing that you can say about Tom Brady this year, and it really bothers me when I see people say, this proves that Brady's the most responsible for the Patriots dynasty. And now, listen, that may be true for different reasons. And if you want to hold that opinion, that's fine. The only thing I learned from Tom Brady this year was he knew when to jump ship from New England. I mean, let's be honest here. This is one of his most talented teams. Like, you go down the list, and I don't say that lightly because I've seen firsthand twice a year for nearly 20 years Tom Brady playing in New England. There have been some really damn good teams there. But this team, I mean, defensively, they're stacked from top to bottom. Offensively, I mean, this is probably the best set of weapons he's ever had by a pretty sizable margin.
Going back maybe 2007 when Randy Moss was going.
When Moss was there, like if you think Randy Moss by himself was better than Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski. I mean, he had O.J. Howard at one point before he went down for the year. Like, it's right up there. And listen, Randy Moss is one of the greatest to ever do it. But, like, from an assortment of weapons.
Also, his offensive line played amazing, too. And it's healthy.
And that's the part that people don't give Tampa Bay enough credit for. Their offensive line has been awesome, especially in the second half of this year. I mean, the big emergence to me has been Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been excellent. He
Blank
got
Cameron
to a little
Jordan.
Bit of a slow start. Yeah.
Blank Cameron Jordan in the playoff game. You could talk about, I know everyone's going to talk about the breeze and all that stuff, but I mean, Cameron Jordan's supposed to be your big end. Saints get 1 sack in that game. Give it to them. And again, I think a lot of people say, oh, it's just Brady. I think it's more than, especially even on the offense, that offensive line is taking it to the next level.
They are winning in spite of Brady. And that's my opinion. And
in the
we were
playoffs,
talking about this. We were talking about this off the air yesterday. They don't get to where they are without him, and I think we're in full agreement on that one. Like, they don't get to a situation where you say, hey, they're 11-5 without Tom Brady, because Brady got the surrounding talent there with him. And listen, Brady had a good year. Like, I'm not going to complain about, like, 40 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, threw for 4,600 yards. Like, that's a really good year for a guy who's 43 years old. He deserves credit for that in itself. But, I mean, you look at the postseason, if you've watched a single game this postseason and said, wow, Tampa Bay just won that game because of Tom Brady, I don't think we're watching the same football. Like, I really don't, because I every time Tampa Bay has played, I've said, man, they've been bailed out by their defense and the inability of Drew Brees to make throws and the ability of Matt LaFleur to make good decisions. That's how this has gone for me for Tampa Bay. And I listen, like I said, all the respect in the world for Brady, his talent, his greatness, but man, I mean, this is clearly not the Tom Brady that we're used to, and he deserves a lot of credit for getting to the Super Bowl, but they're not doing it because of him. They're doing it because of that defense, and they're doing that because of their weapons and their offensive line, and that's where I'm at with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, look, you go back to these last two games, and you talk about that Saints game. He was bailed out by short field. I think he had 9 points off of actual, like, 25 yards, 35 yards starting position. I mean, every touchdown they had was because they got it at the 2 because of a Brees pick or the Jared Cook fumble or whatever it ended up being. The reason the Saints lost that game was turnovers. And to me, like you talked about Brees' inability to throw, it was uncharacteristic too. I mean, the last time Brees had a 3-interception game was 2016. I mean, which you could say even was before his decline. So again, like when you talk about Brees, I mean, yeah, you talk about the arm, talk about all that stuff, but he doesn't really turn the ball over that much. And he did in this game. So that was kind of, to me, where the Saints fell. I mean, I thought the Saints defense played outstanding against Brady. And then last week, I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers saying to the defense, go get me a stop, go get me a stop. They did it 3 times straight. And then Rodgers and Matt LaFleur couldn't score. So you give it to their defense. And that's just kind of where I stand. And maybe Brady's going to show us all wrong and he's going to outduel Patrick Mahomes. But when it comes down to it, he throws like 5 balls every game that are flutter balls that could be picked. That's just, to me, how it is. And the Saints couldn't take advantage of it. They had Marcus Williams, who almost had the pick, but he only had 1 foot in. And then there was a ball that skipped to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and it ended up not being an interception. And then he threw the 3 picks against the Packers, and they were able to take advantage of it. That's just, to me, where he is. He's going to make some amazing throws, but he's just not at the same level. And I think the Chiefs will take advantage of it, and I could see that defense being opportunistic and getting Patrick Mahomes some extra possessions.
Last thing before we go to headlines, quick. With all this bad stuff I'm saying about Brady, and I feel like I'm being extra harsh, and probably am just because of my feelings towards Tom Brady. As a Jets fan, I've been there. I've been through it all. But here's what I will say about Brady. We can complain all we want about him getting there in spite of what Tampa Bay's doing. It's pretty safe to say he outplayed Drew Brees.
Yeah.
And there's a decent argument to make that he outplayed Aaron Rodgers last week. And for that, listen, that's up for debate. But my point maybe on that is that Aaron Rodgers had a lot of chances to win that game, and he couldn't do it. And Brady was able to make a few big throws in the first half that won them that game. They got themselves in position to win that football game. And listen, part of that was because of their run game. Part of that was because of the way Leonard Fournette's playing, and part of that was because of the turnovers. But again, it was Aaron Rodgers making those turnovers too.
Yep.
So in that regard, Brady does deserve credit for getting to this spot and being good enough to get there. There's something to say about knowing what it takes to win. Usually not one of those people. But when Brady's done it for so long, and when he's getting to the Super Bowl about 40-something% of his career, it has to be mentioned. It really does. Oh, yeah. And that's where I stand on Tom Brady. And listen, we'll have our picks later in the show. Kayla will join us to make our picks, but we're moving along with the show. Headlines coming up. Trevor Bauer, Marcelo Zuna. Lots more to come here on One-on-One. We'll be right back.
One on One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One on One. I'm Kayla Wenzel, joining Andrew Gulata and Jackson Heil. Guys, we're going to start off with some big baseball news today. So as you guys have already mentioned, one of the biggest free agents on the market finally signed this Friday. Cy Young winner Trevor Bauer officially joins the reigning world champions, the Los Angeles Dodgers, on a 3-year deal worth $102 million with opt-outs after the first 2 seasons. Bauer is joining a star-studded Dodgers rotation, including Clayton Kershaw, David Price, Walker Buehler. So, Andrew, I'm going to start with you. There was a lot of talk about how Bauer might be coming to the Mets, and then he didn't. And I know that you're a Mets fan. So are you disappointed that you missed out on Bauer? Or are you happy with this move?
Yeah, I mean, you're disappointed because you could have got a guy that, look, has the Cy Young stuff. He won a Cy Young on basically a 1 to 2 year deal with opt-outs with a lot of options. And everyone talks about the off the field stuff, which is definitely a concern. But if it's 1 to 2 years, you're not as worried about that. And to me, there's no bad 1-year contract. Especially when you have Steve Cohen and the money that he's got, there's probably no bad 2-year contract either. So like, you're disappointed about that. I mean, there's 2 sides for me. It's like, one, Trevor Bauer basically had me on watch for like 5 straight hours. He was leaking things. He was leaking like shirts that he was making that said, let's go Mets. And then he sent out codes that said LFGM to get 10% off on his website and all that stuff. Everyone's like, oh, he's coming. And then he just spurns the Mets. And I think it was a negotiation tactic to try to get the Dodgers a few extra million more in there. And obviously it worked. And it feels like, I would say like 2 hours in, I was like, who does this guy think he is? I mean, I'm just going to go out and say that. I know he won the Cy Young, but he's not that good. He's not at the Jacob deGrom level, and he did have like a 4 ERA the year before. And again, that's something that I was just getting a little annoyed at. But the Dodgers get better, and you're the Mets. To me, it's like you're angry, a little angry about it. But I think this Mets team is in good situation to win long term, and Bauer was just kind of right situation at the right time. Like, you had the money to pay him short term. And like, that would have really helped them to win in 2021 maybe compete for a World Series with the Dodgers. But now you're a few years away, and that's not a bad thing. Try to make the playoffs this year. I think that's the goal for the Mets. And I'm not mad about that.
I think from a Mets perspective, I think you're lying to yourself if you're not disappointed about this. Because, listen, I don't care what Trevor Bauer did previously to last year. He was the best pitcher in baseball last year. There's no question about it. You could say all you want about him playing a little bit of a lower level competition, playing in the NL Central, but the dude shoved last year. There's no question about it. And you look at the difference from him as a pitcher, his spin rate was way higher than it was ever in his career last year on his fastball. He was the best pitcher in baseball last year, in my opinion, and there really wasn't much of a question about this. And to get him on what was essentially a 2-year deal with the Dodgers, because making $40 million in that first year, $45 in that second year, with opt-outs after his first and second year. Trevor Bauer said he only wanted to sign 1-year deals, and that's basically what he got. He controls his future for the next 3 years, which I think was really important to him. And for a guy at 30 years old, to get him to a 2-year deal, that's a dream for the Dodgers personally. And it would have been for the Mets too. And I think that's where this stings, because if you were able to get him for the next 2 years, I think there's a really good argument that the Mets are the favorites in the NL East. A really good argument. You look at the rotation, what it would be with DeGrom, him, Carrasco, Stroman, Syndergaard coming back at some point, along with the lineup and whatnot, I think that probably puts the Mets above the Braves potentially. Without Bauer, I don't think that's the case. And here's what's really interesting to me. I think there is a lot of hatred for Trevor Bauer out there. A lot of it that I think is pretty undeserved for the most part. And listen, does he take things too far on social media? Absolutely. And the moment he had with that, I forget how old she was, but when he did harass her a little bit on Twitter, yes. And that is something that is definitely a red flag. I'm not disagreeing with that. But I think it's a little ridiculous to compare that to some of the stuff that has been coming out about Jared Porter and Mickey Callaway. Like, he got upset on social media. We all have our bad moments like that. I'm willing to let it slide for one moment because I look at Trevor Bauer and you look at his dedication to his craft in baseball and how much he cares about the game of baseball. And I think that's something that's really noteworthy for guys going forward, especially when you hear like last year with Anthony Rendon saying he doesn't even love the game of baseball. He just plays because it makes him money. And Trevor Bauer has done a ton for players. He's supported players in the past. He's also hired Rachel Luba, who's now one of the most successful agents in all of baseball. And to hire a girl to do that is pretty damn cool, I think, because to put a woman in that position is, especially when she's deserving of that, is awesome. I think that's great for the sport. And I just think that Trevor Bauer gets a lot of flack that he maybe doesn't deserve. Like I said, has he gone too far on social media a few times? Yes. But I think people saying he's a really bad guy, I think we need to take it easy a little bit there. And listen, I could be wrong. I've never met Trevor Bauer. And this is I'm just making my opinion of what I've seen from him. But I think this is a guy who's just incredibly competitive on a lot of different stages. And it leaks out into his personal life sometimes, and that happens. But I overall, I think this is a great deal for the Dodgers. They have an embarrassment of riches pitching-wise. I mean, it's disgusting at their rotation. I mean, the fact that Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin are their starting pitchers number 6 and 7, that's ludicrous. And they are by far the favorites to repeat as world champions next year. And listen, we could say everything about the Padres did, getting Blake Snell and Yu Darvish. It's the Dodgers, and the National League goes through LA once again.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that on a show a couple weeks back, we had been talking about how like reigning champions don't really like remain reigning champions. Like they are kind of a one and done type of deal. And I think that like this kind of move from the Dodgers like really breaks that mold. And it's really like saying like, we're here to stay. Like, we don't want to just give up our title for this 1 year. We want to keep it, and we want to remain the best in the National League and remain super competitive about it. I don't think that the Mets, as a Mets fan, I think that maybe you should be a little disappointed, but I don't know. I take his off the field stuff kind of a little more personally. I feel like like behaviors kind of can start on Twitter, and then like if they kind of continue, they could be like more dramatic and just bigger and more damaging, I think, to like the Mets reputation. And so like, while it's definitely not at the level of Jared Porter, like he did freak out on social media, and that's a totally different thing. I just think that these types of behaviors can begin in a sort of small way, and then they can escalate a little bit. So for me personally, I think that this was better for the Mets to not break the luxury tax on this deal and to leave it and work on getting an outfielder and a starter pitcher, maybe an infielder, a third baseman at some kind of lower levels, and still not break the luxury tax just with this one big move.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Kayla, too. And I definitely agree on Bauer that it is like his behavior is a concern for sure. I think my biggest thing just with him specifically about what he's done on social media. I mean, he's nuts. Like clearly, like there's no question that
what he did yesterday was nuts with the Mets.
Yeah,
he's putting out.
Terrible.
I would love to pitch. I'm gonna pitch in Queens next year. He's sending out emails like he took it too far yesterday, in my opinion. He's toying with Mets fans, and then Rachel Luba after she was like, "Oh, I still love you, Mets fans." I was like, I feel like you just used this as a negotiation tool. I feel used as a Mets fan right now. I'm not gonna lie. And
well, I mean, like what star doesn't do that? Like every not
that
not the
level.
sick things, but like using like teams as negotiating tools. That's very common.
They usually don't
amongst
get it to
stars.
the fans though. Like, why would he send out? He made T-shirts up and sent them about like
By the way,
sitting on the Big
by the
Apple.
way, while we're on the topic of this, Bob Nightingale can't get a freaking report right to save his life, man. It's unbelievable. I mean, if he's the first guy that puts out a report, it's a lock that it's wrong. Like you might as well have seen that and been like, oh, he's a Dodger. Like he's a Dodger. This is happening. Like it's like unbelievable. I don't know who his sources are, but like I feel like every big report he finds a way to get wrong. And that's the thing that would make me upset as a Mets fan, because Bauer's got his shtick. He's a little nuts in the head. Like when you see the report that he's going to the Mets and has agreed to a deal, like that's on the reporter. That's not on Bauer. Like no one from Bauer's team is going to leak saying that he's signed already, especially with a guy like that who's got a huge ego, who wants to release a video himself for 2 minutes, like alternating Mets and Dodgers jerseys. Like, he wants to be the guy to release the news. So that would be the part that would drive me a little nuts as a Mets fan. But back to Bauer in general and back to the Mets. I think the biggest thing you can take away from this, and it's not something that we didn't already know, I think, is that Steve Cohen has shown a willingness that he's willing to go over the luxury tax. There's no doubt about it. And I think that's important going forward, because I've said this a few times. I think the biggest asset you could have in baseball right now is a willingness to try to win and a willingness to go over the luxury tax. I mean, the Dodgers have airmailed the luxury tax now with Bauer. I mean, they're at like $240 million in payroll for this upcoming year. I believe they're over $30 million over the luxury tax or something crazy like that. But like a willingness to compete and a willingness to win is the most important asset you could have in baseball, because you could have some of the smartest people in the industry and it won't matter at some point because you have owners who aren't willing to spend money. Oakland being one example, where you have an excellent front office. You had Billy Beane there for years, who finally left. But the biggest asset you could have is a willingness to win. And I think you've seen that with the Mets, where they're willing to go over the luxury tax, or they're willing to do it this year now because they still have a lot of needs to address right now. They could use a third baseman. I think they need another starting pitcher, personally, even with the rotation that they have together. And they need a center fielder. And will they go out and spend? I mean, James Paxton is still out there on the market. Jake Odorizzi, who I personally would not pay. I actually wouldn't pay either of those guys, to be honest with you. But, like, they have shown a willingness to spend money. And I think that's very important going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say, I agree with you. Starting pitching is huge. I mean, they're connected to Rich Hill, who to me is like the lefty version of Bartolo Colon right now. And
I love Rich Hill.
He's good. Yeah.
I think he'd be a great fit.
And I think he would fit right there in the rotation. And I think that would be good in their building rotation depth. And that's so important. And that's why, I mean, you talk about Bauer on the Mets, just you talk about that rotation with him. I mean, you go to the playoffs with that rotation. I mean, that's crazy. But I think they will add, they'll probably will add a center fielder. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of JBJ, but I think they actually may be willing to get him now at this point, maybe pay him a little extra because they do have a hole at center field. But I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't give him a big contract, but maybe they will. But again, it depends how they reuse the money, because I think they will try to get up to the luxury tax or close to it. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And again, I feel like, yes, willingness to spend is so important. I mean, you have Trevor Bauer making more than entire team's payroll. I'll just leave it at that. Like, that's huge.
I mean, more than the Orioles. As an Orioles fan, like you see Trevor Bauer's contract and you're like, wow. Like, I mean, that is literally more than the entire Orioles payroll. And if you took out Chris Davis, who's making about 80% of that, it feels like it's like they'd be nearly doubling. Actually, they'd be more than doubling what the Orioles payroll was. Before we get to Ozuna, I just want to acknowledge one last thing about Bauer, because I think it is a very important point Caleb brought up with his behavior and how that fits in a locker room. I mean, because you've seen how things ended with him in Cleveland. And I mean, one of the funniest, bizarre things is when they tried to take him out in Kansas City and he chucked the ball over the center field seats for no reason. Like, there are definitely red flags with his behavior. And I don't think that shouldn't go without acknowledgement, especially like the stuff on Twitter, the harassment stuff. I think that is definitely noteworthy. And I think maybe I kind of like over exaggerated how much I think it's like it shouldn't be a factor, because it definitely is. I think my main point with people complaining about it is that I think a lot of people are comparing it to what happened with Jared Porter and comparing it to what happened with Mickey Callaway. And I think it's a completely different conversation because what Jared Porter did was disgusting. Like that's a horrific thing for anyone to experience. And I'm not saying harassment isn't on Twitter, but I think that was more of a back and forth with two people that clearly were a little bit colluded in the head and were I think it was a little bit more of on both sides there. And what Mickey Callaway did is also terrible. Like I just think it's a completely different conversation. And I think that's where I get a little frustrated with it, saying like, listen, it's one thing to be like a bad person and an angry one. It's another to do stuff like that's criminal and sending pictures of your junk to someone. Like that's horrific. And I think there's a line there. But like I said, I agree with you, Kayla, that I think it is a concern.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to like call you out or anything.
No, I didn't take it as that. I wanted to just kind of acknowledge my statement for a second and re-up that. But anyways, other news in the National League East.
Anyways, on to Marcell Ozuna. So he rejoins the Braves on a 4-year, $64 million deal. So he was the 2020 National League home run leader, and he's obviously going to be like a huge part of their offense this year. So Andrew, how do you like this move for the Braves? How do you like this move for Ozuna?
I love Ozuna. I mean, I really do. He's one of my favorite players in this NL East, and it pains me that I'm gonna see him for 4 years now with the Braves. I mean, he's just such a great hitter. It kind of reminds me of Cespedes, to the way he hits and just the way he has the power, but also is a great situational hitter. I mean, he hit 338 last year. I mean, he's a guy that can flat out hit. It'll be interesting with this deal because he played a lot of DH last season. And now, obviously, the DH won't be in this year, so he's going to have to play left field, which is, I guess, a concern. But I think next year the DH should be in place, so that shouldn't be. I think when you look at this deal, I think they're projecting him to be a DH down the line. But I don't know. He's such a great hitter, and you adding him to that lineup. And again, I think that's the extra piece they need to at least try to beat the Dodgers at an NLCS or something. But this was a big move for them, as I think Ozuna is a really good player and an underrated player.
I agree with you completely. I mean, I love Ozuna. I mean, his bat is unbelievable. I mean, you look at the advanced metrics on him. I mean, expected slugging over 500 in each of the last 4 seasons. He was expected slugging of 638 last year. I mean, that's insane. I mean, his expected slugging percentage was actually greater than his slugging percentage, and his slugging percentage was 636. Like that says a lot about him as a hitter. And I mean, his exit velocity was a career high last year. Like you mentioned, he hit 338, which I'm not a big batting average guy personally, but I mean, when you're putting the bat on the ball that much, hitting it that hard, like you're a stud. Like there's no question about it. And he was I want to say he was one of the 3 or 4 best hitters in baseball last year. This actually reminds me a lot of JD Martinez in a different way because they have very different styles at the plate. I mean, JD loves to go the other way. He's an exit velocity guy, and he's a guy that lives on launch angle. Marcell Ozuna swings with vicious intent every time he's at the plate, but he also has a control about it that I think is really interesting because you look at the numbers for him, and he had a 14% walk rate last year. Like, and he's getting on base 43% of the time. Like, that's something that's really significant. And to bring him back to a lineup that already has Freddie Freeman, the MVP last year, already has Ronald Acuna, like, this is probably still the best lineup in baseball, in my opinion. And I think it's really interesting because if the Mets add Bauer, they might be the favorites in the NL East. I wasn't ready to go there yet because I really love this Atlanta team, and this was before they brought Ozuna back. I mean, I love their lineup. Their bullpen is one of the best in the game, and when they get Mike Soroka back, the rotation is going to be good.
Yeah.
But now I'm definitely still with Atlanta, and I think that even with the additions that San Diego made, I think this is still probably maybe the second best team in the National League. All I know is that the NL is going to be a dogfight this year, man. Like, there's a lot of really good teams. We mentioned especially the Dodgers before. Yeah. NL East has a ton of talent from top to bottom, especially with the Phillies bringing JT Realmuto back, and the Mets doing what they've done this offseason. And you think maybe the Nationals get back to something resembling
Also, the Cardinals
relevancy
in the
last
Central,
year.
with
Yeah,
getting
and the
Arenado.
Cardinals getting Nolan Arenado. Like, the NL is going to be a rock fight this year. And it's going to be really exciting to watch because there's just so many teams with so much talent. And, man, I need baseball season back. I really do. And we all do. But this is going to be a fun season, and especially on the National League side of it. I mean, you could realistically, like, the Dodgers complicate a lot of things because I still think they're so much better than everyone. But, like,
Yeah.
in a normal season, you feel like you look at the National League and say, like, man, there's 4 or 5 teams that could realistically win the World Series out of the National League alone. And we haven't even gotten to the Yankees, Tampa Bay, Houston on the American League side of it. And that's what's going to make this year exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I totally think that the National League is going to be anybody's game. I personally like the Phillies in it, but I don't know realistically if they could actually take down the Braves or the Mets. But I would like to see them do well. I would love to see the Phillies.
I'll say this about the Phillies. Like, they have all the talent in the world. Like, I mean, Harper, I think Harper was awesome last year. Like, I love Bryce Harper. I think he gets a bad rap for really no reason because the guy can hit. Like, he can flat out hit. Real Muto's the best catcher in baseball. There's really not a close second, in my opinion. Maybe Yasmani Grandal or a few others, but, like, that lineup's really good. And with Alec Baum coming up last year, he was awesome. I just don't know if this team has a major league bullpen. Like, that's my only question with Philadelphia. Like, that bullpen, for the most part, looks like it belongs in Double-A. Like, not even Triple-A, Double-A we're talking about. And listen, they have talent there, but, like, they're going to be a team that's going to hang around because of how good their rotation and lineup is. The Marlins were awesome last year. Like, we haven't even mentioned the Marlins, who went to the NLDS a year ago and are only going to continue to get better as their young stars continue to come up. So, it's going to be a wild division. And Kayla, we thank you for being a part of an excellent segment as always. She'll be back with headlines later in the show. But before we get into more Super Bowl stuff, we got a great hour ahead, and it starts with Zach Braziller. Interview with him of the New York Post, talking everything college basketball here on One, New York's longest running sports call and show. Once again, we thank you for tuning in. 90.7 FM, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, however you're joining us tonight. We appreciate you. And listen, if you're watching right now, it's officially Super Bowl Sunday. So that's exciting, folks. But once again, we're talking college basketball. Zach Braziller coming up next.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York, right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Back here on One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, Jackson Heil, Andrew Galata. Now a pleasure to be joined by Zach Braziller, New York Post college basketball reporter, focused mostly on St. John's, Seton Hall, Big East. Zach, thanks so much for taking the time this morning. How's everything going?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. And let's start with the Big East. And hottest team in the Big East right now, probably the Red Storm. 5 straight wins for St. John's, coming off a huge win at home against Villanova. I mean, Mike Anderson has never had a losing season, and we're probably seeing why over these last few weeks. Posh Alexander has emerged as one of the best point guards in the Big East. What have you made of this St. John's resurgence lately?
Yeah, it really kind of came out of nowhere. They were not playing well. They were 1-5 in the league. The fan base was pretty down, and now here they go. They win, five in a row, 6 of 7, and they've now beaten decent teams. It's not just weak, not just like the bottom of the barrel teams in the league. They obviously really outplayed Villanova. They won at UConn. They won at Marquette. Um, they're they're playing very well. I mean, Alexander's been terrific. Julian Champagny, the sophomore forward, is leading the league in scoring. But it's really been their defense. That their defense was really good last year, and for most of this year until this stretch, it wasn't. They really struggled guarding the ball, and now you're seeing it lately. It's night and day. It's hard to kind of really understand just how they went from being a bad defense team to what they are now, which is a very good defensive team.
Yeah, and just obviously they've progressed so much this early in the season. Where do you feel like they can progress further to solidify themselves in the Big East and also for an NCAA tournament bid?
Um, you know, an issue with them is always rebounding. They're not very big. That's going to be important, for them moving forward. But it's just about consistency. That's one thing these last 6-7 games they've been consistent. That's been the key. It's just being consistent. And sometimes it's tough to be consistent when your best players are a sophomore and a freshman, which is the case with Alexander and Champagny. But these guys have just been so consistent. I think important they're supposed to be getting Greg Williams Jr. back. He's their third leading scorer. He's a junior. He's a very good defender, and that's the thing. They've been winning when without him, and he's one of their best players. So that's kind of even more impressive is they've been able to play this well without one of their key guys, and he's for early part of the year he was sometimes their best player, at least their second best player. So, but I think they're going to need him because I think you're going to see some guys regress a little bit. Posh isn't going to play this well every game.
Mm-hmm.
Champagny might have some off games. They're going to need Greg to really kind of play well and help out a little here.
Zach, let's talk about the game specifically against Villanova, because I think that if there's maybe one thing that was exposed on the Nova side of things is if you can take away Colin Gillespie, which is a very difficult task to do, they really struggled to get into a rhythm offensively. Do you view this as just a little bump in the road for Villanova, or do you think there's maybe a little bit of a bigger problem on offense for them?
No, I think it's just one game. That I think St. John's matches up well with them because Villanova doesn't really hurt you in the paint, and that's one area you could really hurt St. John's. And most teams don't play like St. John's. They're not going to pressure you for 40 minutes. They're not going to pick up full court. And Villanova really, after Gillespie, doesn't have a ton of guard depth and a lot of ball handlers. And St. John's took advantage of that. But no, I think Villanova is very good. I think it was a case of they got rattled a little bit. St. John's played as well as they can play, and Villanova was off. But I do not think all of a sudden there's this blueprint for how you could really shut Villanova down. I just think it was one of those things where St. John's played a great game. Villanova didn't play well, and the matchup just worked in St. John's favor.
Yeah, and obviously Villanova losing that game kind of opens, I guess, some questions like maybe teams can challenge Villanova here in the Big East. What team would you think gives them the biggest challenge going forward? Obviously, St. John's beat them, but do you think another team could possibly knock them off or maybe in the tournament later on as well?
Yeah, I like Creighton a lot. Now they haven't played well either lately. They're coming off a loss to Georgetown at home. They should have lost to DePaul. They play very poorly. They were down big to Seton Hall, but I still like Creighton. I think they'll figure things out. They have a million scorers. They can play fast. Marcus Zagorowski is terrific. Denzel Mahoney is terrific. They have so many guys who could score. I do like Creighton a lot. I think Creighton is right there with Villanova, but they've got to figure things out too. That's the funny thing about this league right now is the two teams that are ranked, the two teams that clearly on paper are the best teams, are not playing well right now. And that's, the other night, Wednesday night, you had both Creighton and Villanova lose and really lose comfortably. It was against, it was pretty stunning.
it's amazing. You look at a team like Creighton, like one week they look like a team that could pretty easily get to the Elite Eight. And then you look at the losses on their schedule. I mean, home losses to Providence, Georgetown. They lost at Marquette. Actually, they lost to Marquette at home, but so volatile in this league. And one of the other teams that is similar in that you just don't know what you're getting from them every night is Seton Hall. And one of the weirder years in the Kevin Willard era, obviously trying to replace Miles Powell from a year ago. And they lost Quincy McKnight, Romero Gill, but they still have a lot of talent, and they're still right in the thick of things in the Big East. What have you made of the Pirates this year?
Yeah, they started slow, which I kind of thought they would. Their schedule was they had a very tough non-conference schedule. Bryce Aiken, a transfer from Harvard, they really expected to be a big producer offensively in the backcourt. Hasn't played a lot. He's had a lot of injuries. He's a very talented kid. He's healthy now. I think that's kind of hurt them. But, I think they've had a pretty good year for the most part when you consider what they lost. Look, they've lost some tough games. They blew the lead, a big lead to Creighton at home, which would have been a very big win. They had Nova down at Villanova and didn't find a way to finish off that game. They're still right there on the bubble. I think they're going to make the tournament. They had a nice win over Providence the other day. I think it's kind of one of those gap years, after you're really good. If you could make the tournament, it just shows you the strength of your program. And I think they're going to make it. It's one thing about Kevin Willard's program. When their backs are against the wall, they respond, and they really responded against Providence very, very, very well. They have a top 25 recruiting class coming in next year. I think it's just they're just gonna keep rolling along. But this is an interesting month for them. They can make the tournament. To make the tournament the year after everything they lost and a rough start and Aiken not really playing a lot would really speak volumes about this program, I think.
Staying in New Jersey, but moving over to the Big Ten right now with Rutgers, and Rutgers football and basketball now turning around. What do you think the biggest key to the Rutgers basketball team turnaround this season?
They were good last year. They were probably going to make the tournament last year if we had a tournament. Obviously, we didn't. They returned a ton. Steve Peichel has done a terrific job. I mean, they're now starting to recruit better, but the strength of this team is guys who are kind of overlooked. Miles Johnson wasn't a big recruit. Geo Baker wasn't a big recruit. Ron Harper Jr. wasn't a big recruit. These are the three best players. He's done a phenomenal job at just developing guys and finding guys that really fit the way he wants to play. He likes to play slow. He likes to be all about defense and grinding and toughness and hard work, and that's what Rutgers is. I think they're very good. They went through a bad stretch there, granted against some really good teams in the Big Ten. They lost to the likes of Iowa and Wisconsin and Ohio State. And, the fans started kind of freaking out a little bit, but they've now won 4 straight and they're playing really well. They have to go to Iowa next week, which will be a very, very interesting game. But right now, I think they're probably like a 7 seed in the tournament. And, it's a shame, with all these local teams playing well that there are no fans because it's really shaping up to be a very fun season. I could see all 3 big schools making the tournament, and that hasn't happened since 1991. And it's just too bad that the fans really can't be there to enjoy it.
Speaking with Zach Brazil of the New York Post, and Zach, I'm going to ask you an impossible question, but with everything that has happened with those 3 programs, I mean, you look at the rebuilds that have taken place. I mean, Steve Peichel's done an awesome job. Kevin Willard has obviously rebuilt Seton Hall, and Mike Anderson, it's only year 2, but he's done a terrific job thus far getting this St. John's program on track. If you're starting a new program tomorrow, which of those 3 coaches are you starting it with?
I'd probably go with Kevin Willard. I think he's a terrific coach. I really do. And I don't think people understand how hard it is to win at Seton Hall. It's easy. It's an easier program to win at than St. John's. I don't think there's any question. St. John's has a much better following when New York City and the Garden and everything. I get Rutgers is really tough and it's been a long time, but it's a big state school. They have good facilities. To me, Seton Hall is what he's done there is so impressive. I don't think it's basically a commuter school. They have a small fan base, to get guys there and to develop them and to do what they've done. he's made the tournament about 4 or 5 years in a row, and only now is their recruiting starting to kind of pick up. And it just speaks volumes about how good of a coach he is. And, we'll see how long he lasts. There's always rumors about could he go somewhere else and, this and that. I know this though. When he leaves, Seton Hall fans, I don't think they appreciate him enough. When he leaves, they're going to realize what a terrific coach they had and how lucky they were.
Yeah, and moving nationally now, I think the top two teams, and right now I'd say they're above the rest, is Gonzaga and Baylor right now, both the undefeated teams. Out of the two teams, if you had to pick one to win it all, who would you take?
I'm going Baylor. I think they're tougher. They're obviously going to be more battle tested coming out of the Big 12. Gonzaga basically going to have 2 months of scrimmages before the NCAA tournament. I think that matters. I think that's significant. I also don't think, everyone seems to think, oh, these two teams are Final Four locks. One of these teams is going to win the championship. I don't believe that. I think we've seen, as good as they are, and I think these two teams are terrific. And they are clearly the two best teams in the country. But that doesn't mean they're going to the Final Four, and that doesn't mean they're cutting down the nets. We've seen it time and time again that teams that we think are just so clearly the best teams don't make it. It's just the way the tournament is. It's just too unpredictable. But if I'm picking one, I'm picking Baylor just because they're just getting tested so much more. And that, to me, they're going to be just so much better prepared for the tournament than Gonzaga. And that's not Gonzaga's fault. It's just the way it is. They're not in their conference hurts them. But I just love Baylor. I love their defense. I love the way they shoot the three. And they play in a brutal conference that tests them all the time.
You mentioned that you think that it is a good possibility that one of these teams doesn't make the Final Four when it's all said and done. Who do you think presents the biggest challenge? Because obviously right now you look at the teams outside them. I mean, Michigan looks like a big challenger, even though they've kind of been on pause for a few weeks. The Big Ten has a ton of teams that you think possibly could, with Illinois and Iowa and the way they play. Houston out of the American could be someone that challenge. Who do you think presents the biggest challenge to Gonzaga and Baylor?
I think there are a bunch of teams. You obviously have to wait to see when the brackets come out and who's there. Michigan's very good. I think Ohio State is a team that's really emerging. They're terrific. You got a bunch of teams in the Big Ten. And I'll tell you, Virginia's playing really well. I know Gonzaga, beat them up pretty good when they played, but Virginia's playing very well right now. The way they defend, they can pull off an upset. Villanova, I know they looked bad the other night, but I'm not counting Villanova out. I think Creighton has all the potential to do it. And you never know. We always see these teams that just get hot out of nowhere in March. And that's the thing, everyone likes to just, make these hot takes and say, well, this is what's going to happen. We don't know. This isn't college football. Their upsets happen, That's the beauty of the tournament is you get 68 teams and they all think they can do it. Realistically, obviously not all 68 can, but you're going to be a handful of teams that literally can make the Final Four. I just think we've seen too many surprises in the tournament over the years to think it's a foregone conclusion that this is going to be our national championship game. I just don't see it.
I have one more question, and I would say just kind of zooming out a little bit, talking about the NCAA granting everyone the free year of eligibility. How do you think that affects scholarships recruiting here going forward?
That's a great question. I really don't know. It's going to all depend on each school. While it's allowed, it doesn't mean a school isn't forced to take it back. Some schools might say, look, we have so-and-so coming in, like we just can't do it. You're going to see a lot of kids that probably say, I can't do it. But you're also going to see a good amount of kids come back, which to me is good for the sport. You're already seeing a lot of it in college football. A lot of big name guys are coming back, and that's good. It creates better teams. It creates better competition. And I think you're going to see some in college basketball. I asked Rasheem Dunn the other day from St. John's, he could come back next year for a 6th year. And he said he's definitely open to it. I always think continuity and experience is always makes teams better. Having older guys can only help. So I think it's a good thing. I also don't think it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to see tons and tons of guys come back, but I definitely think you will see some, and it's also going to depend on the school, and every school's probably going to handle this differently.
Speaking with Zach Braziller of the New York Post, Zach, just a few more before I wrap this up. One of those guys who potentially could come back, maybe probably won't, but Luka Garza, who's been terrific for Iowa this year. I mean, 26 points a game. He's now shooting the ball 45% from three this year. Is he a lock for the player of the year right now? Do you think there's anyone that can touch? I mean, obviously Jared Butler's had a great year, one of the best two-way players in the country, Corey Kispert for Gonzaga. But do you think that any of them have a chance to take the Wooden Award when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I think Garza's, pretty close to a lock. I think Butler's got a shot there. Iowa's slipping up a little bit, but as long as Garza keeps putting up these numbers, I don't really see him not winning. The problem with the Gonzaga guys is they almost cancel each other out. They have so many good players, and it's kind of hard to pick between them. I think Garza's, now Iowa's got to win though. They've lost some games here that isn't going to help, but his numbers just are through the roof. He's going to have to really fall back, and other guys are going to have to really emerge for something to change, I think.
And going to the opposite end of the spectrum, on the freshman side, two of the best cards in the country right now, Jalen Suggs and Cade Cunningham. You're an NBA team looking at those guys. Who would you say is the better prospect right now, and why?
That's a tough one. If I'm an NBA team, I'd love either one. If I'm the Knicks and I can get either guy, I'd be ecstatic. I think they're both absolutely terrific. I mean, they're both great passers. They both score it. They both shoot it. That's like a 1A and a 1AB basically. I mean, it's going to be really itching the Knicks right now. I mean, the Knicks, they're playing well, but then they have the Mavericks pick, and the Mavericks are a mess. I mean, Knicks could end up with 2 top 10 picks, and in this draft, that's huge because this is a loaded draft. I mean, people have talked about this draft for a few years now, and maybe imagine both the ping pong balls fall the Knicks way, and they can pick between those two guys. I mean, those and it's not just them. You have Jalen Green in the G League, who is fantastic. Jonathan Kuminga is fantastic. It is a loaded draft. If the Knicks end up just with one top 5 pick, they'd be doing cartwheels.
It should be exciting, and it's an exciting time to be in the metro area with the Knicks, the Nets, and obviously everything that's happening in college hoops. Zach, we really appreciate the time today. Before we let you go, who's your pick for Sunday?
Oh yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are going to win the game. You don't pick you can't pick against Mahomes. I kind of equated that Chiefs-Browns game. I know Mahomes was hurt, but the Chiefs-Browns game was when like the NCAA tournament favorite has like an early round game and they need like a buzzer beater or something like that just to get by, and then they cruise. That's kind of the way I see that game for the Chiefs. They had their close call, and now they're going to win. I'm not saying they're going to blow them out. I'll go 38-27. I just think Mahomes and his weapons are just too damn good. And I got to stick with my guy Travis Kelce, who I've had in my fantasy keeper league for about 4 years. So
it's a great guy to have. And Zach, we really appreciate the time again. Once again, Zach Braziller of the New York Post taking some time with us on one-on-one. Zach, enjoy the weekend, enjoy Sunday, and have a good one.
We did talk Fordham coaching. You
want to get into it real quick?
I'll answer a question, sure.
Yeah. So, listen, obviously with the change this week, this past week, I would say my big question is for you. Well, I'll ask too. How desirable do you think this opening is going to be, first and foremost, being that no one's really been able to win at Fordham recently? And what direction would you go in that head coaching hire if you're head coach? I mean, obviously there's a few young guys out there. I know the two names I keep hearing are Jared Grasso from Bryant and Shaheen Holloway from St. Peter's, who I think would both be 2 home run hires. But what do you think about the prospects of this job and also of the direction that Fordham may go in?
It's funny, you hear about the job and you hear different things. Some people say it's actually more appealing than people think because there's talk that Fordham's going to start putting much more money into the program. Then you hear other people say it's radioactive. A coach goes there, your career is, going to take a huge hit. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's as bad of a job as some people think. I don't think it's maybe as appealing as others. There is a belief that they are going to put more money into the program. That means they're going to pay a coach more than they've paid. It means they're going to, try to do some other things financially with the budget, which is significant. And if I'm Fordham, Shaheen Holloway is my number one choice, and I'm doing anything I can to get him. I think he's terrific. He's a local guy. He's universally respected by high school and AAU coaches in this area. Look what he's done at St. Peter's, which is an even worse job. St. Peter's might be the worst job in the country. All due respect, when you look at their gym and the situation and the amount of money they spend and all that stuff, he would be my top pick. You've heard some other big names. I know Steve Lavin is interested. Fran Fraschilla. The one thing I've heard from Fordham people is the number one trait they want in a coach is a recruiter. They see the kind of talent in the city, where New York City now is you have a ton of mid-major guys now, which is right up Fordham's alley, obviously. Mm-hmm. Shaheen Holloway is a terrific recruiter. I know these other guys can recruit too, but he would be my guy. I don't know if he wants the job, but to me, he would be a no doubt guy. Steve Lavin would be interesting. I'll tell you, he would definitely add some flash to that job and turn some heads. But to me, I think you need a young guy who's really going to work and wants to try to kind of make a reputation for himself. But I am encouraged by what I've heard about that the administration understands if they want to turn this around, they need to really find a way to do some things there monetarily to not only attract a coach, but to just boost that program up.
I mean, you look at the guys Holloway got to Seton Hall when he was under Kevin Willard. I mean, Isaiah Whitehead, Kadeem Carrington, Desi Rodriguez, Angel Delgado. The list goes on for guys he's gotten there. And I'm right with you that, I think he would be my first choice for the job right now. But before I do get you out of here real quick, now that you got me rolling on Fordham basketball, I do want to ask this question real quick because you think recruiting is important, and I'm completely with you there. But do you think that going with someone young who is probably going to view this Fordham job as a stepping stone to a bigger job, do you think that should be significant at all in this process as opposed to trying to get a guy who says, this could be my home for the next 10 years?
That's an interesting question, because if you do hire Shaheen Holloway, you got to kind of worry, well, what if Kevin Willard leaves Seton Hall? Is he going to be the guy they look to for Seton Hall? But I don't think you can kind of think like that. I think if you're Fordham and, if you get a coach in here and he does well enough to where he can get another job, you just, you got to accept it. That means he did well at Fordham and maybe his top assistant, you could kind of just fill in there. I don't think that's something you can think about when you're hiring someone. I think you just got to hope you get the right guy. And look, if he does well enough and he chooses to leave, that means your program is doing better. And that's a good thing. They need to find a way to just to get in a good, young, hardworking guy. I just think Holloway is just too perfect. You cannot find a person to say a bad word about him. I think he would get players at Fordham, and I think he would win. I think Grasso would be terrific too. I think Jared is a very good recruiter. He's a good coach. He's done terrific things at Bryant so far. Those would be my two guys. No retreads, no big name guys. Give me two guys who have a past history of working and recruiting and doing it and getting it done. That's the way I'd look at it.
Zach, now we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us on One-on-One. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and like I said, enjoy Super Bowl Sunday.
All right, guys. Have a good one. My pleasure.
WFUV is the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. Keep it locked right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org to catch every Fordham basketball game this year. We'll take you through an extraordinary season with live play-by-play and in-depth pregame and postgame analysis. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Jackson Isle, Andrew Galata here on 90.7 FM, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, wherever you're joining us. We're glad to have you. It's just about an hour and a half left of our show today, and we're sticking with some hoop talks. Just talked to Zach Braziller of the New York Post, discussing all things college basketball. Really interesting discussion on a lot of things surrounding the landscape of college hoops. And now we're moving on to the NBA side of things, and it's been an interesting week for the NBA. On a lot of fronts, and there's been discussions about the All-Star game, whether that should happen or not after the NBA officially scheduling it. Before we get into that, last night was weird, really weird in Brooklyn. Nets are playing the Raptors on ESPN, and announced about 5 minutes before tip, 10 minutes maybe, that Kevin Durant had to be pulled from the starting lineup because of health and safety protocols, and no one knew what that meant. What eventually came out was that he came into contact with someone who had been exposed, who had a test that couldn't be read. They couldn't tell if he was positive or negative. So once that was announced that was the case, once they found out that was the case, they let him back on the court for some reason. Yeah. And he plays the rest of the first half, playing well. He's got 8 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, something crazy like that at half. And then the third quarter is about to start. He's on the sideline, and he finds out that he can't play the rest of the game. This is about 2 minutes after we all see it on Twitter from Woj. And he's forced into the locker room, into isolation. He tweets out at 9:53 while the game's going on, "Free me." Just weird. And I think that I don't know what to take away from it specifically, but I think my biggest thing on this is that there's got to be some clarity for the players and for everyone about what these health and safety protocols are. And because they come out and say that that happens, and I get there has to be some sort of confidentiality here, and I understand that, but when you're talking about a player like Kevin Durant, who's not only an MVP candidate, but more importantly for this case, someone who's already had COVID-19 and has already been exposed to the virus, has had antibodies in the past, I'm not saying he should have played, but if you're going to pull him from the game at that point, you gotta pull everyone. Because clearly if it's a risk for him to be on the floor at that point in the game, then it's a risk for everyone to be on the floor, because they've all been pretty much exposed to someone who they think may have COVID-19. How can you let the rest of the game play on with him not on the floor? It either has to be everyone goes off the floor or everyone stays and you let him play through it. Personally, I don't know which one would have been best, because when you look at what's happened, it was clear that Kevin Durant has already had the virus. He's had the antibodies in the past. I would have just let him play at that point, because the damage is done at that point. If you're going to let them play and you're going to let them start the game with people who have already within the locker room been exposed to Kevin Durant, it doesn't make a lot of sense to pull him for health and safety protocols when that affects everyone else on the floor. It makes no sense, Andrew. I'm really struggling to make anything of it, to be honest.
It seems like they're making these protocols up just like off the top of their head, because not only do they pull him, and like you said, yeah, then you should pull the whole game if you're really concerned, but you pull him, and then if you see the test is inconclusive, wouldn't he stay out the whole game until you know it's positive or negative? It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. It kind of reminds me of like the Justin Turner thing, what happened in the World Series. And like you would think the NBA would learn from that, but I guess not. And again, it's just, to me, it looks like they're just making it up as they go. And that's something that, again, I feel like you would think they would learn, because we've had basically every sport now go through not only just bubbles, we've seen it now, go through the whole season. The NFL's about to finish their season, and you still have stuff like this going on. To me, it just makes no sense.
What's striking to me is that, like you said, we've seen this in baseball happen already. Like, I don't know how you can not allow him on the road trip after he literally was exposed to, like, if he's at risk and he potentially has it, then why doesn't everyone on the Nets, like, why are they not at risk? They were literally playing basketball with him in the first half of this game. They warmed up with him. He was on the sidelines with them. Like, what about this makes any sense at all? And that's the biggest thing that's frustrating to me. Like you said, it just seems like they're completely making it up as they go along. And listen, I understand how difficult of a circumstance this is for the NBA to deal with. Like, we're dealing with a global pandemic. Like, no one's really ever been through this where you're playing basketball and trying to, I understand you have to make money through this. Like, but man, like, I can't find a single ounce of logic behind it. Yeah, like show some sense of consistency here. Like if Kevin Durant might be positive, why isn't James Harden possibly positive? And why isn't Kyrie Irving, who they all play with and I'm sure all see off the court all the time? Like, if someone's been exposed, then you got to scrap the whole operation for the game, or you'll let them play through it. And they did neither. They decided to pull one guy who may potentially been exposed to this entire thing and said, nah, you guys are okay. You guys all may have been exposed as well, but we're just going to let this game go on. And
then they brought him back in the game, and then they pulled him again.
Yeah. like it's like, make a decision one way or another, man. And I honestly think I think they should have let Durant play personally, because I get how much of a risk the coronavirus is, obviously, and I think that's pretty clear now after we've been through nearly a year of this pandemic. But like, it's been pretty scientifically stated that, like, if you've had it, you're not getting it again, like, for the most part. Like, there are obviously very special circumstances where that might be true, and I am not a scientist by any means, and I'm not an expert on this, but like, if you've had it, you've had it. I'll be the first to say, like, I have not officially like had the virus, but like, I've been exposed to so many people that have had it. I mean, like, I was sipping from the same drink of my friend who had it, and I didn't get it, which means I probably had it somewhere along the lines. Like, I have a theory that I had it like right when we were initially sent home from Fordham a year ago. Like, I was sick. I was going to work that day, and I get a call. I'm like 2 blocks away from work. They're like, yeah, like, this place is compromised. There's been like 4 people have tested positive. And this is when, like, you had you thought you were dying at first. Like, this was when this was happening. So, and I was sick at that time, whatnot. But like, my point here in this, as I tell people a story that no one cares about, is that if you've had it, like, you're probably not getting it again. And in this case, we know Kevin Durant has had it. Like, he had tested positive last year. Like, we know he's had this virus, and he's tested negative. The person who he was potentially exposed to tested positive. Like, if you test negative, like, you're probably fine. It's just frustrating, because it just seems like no one understands what the protocols are. And like, they say health and safety protocols. What the hell are they?
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I mean, look, I'm not a scientist. Like, I mean, look, I'm not going to comment on, do they know, like, there are cases, like, and, that you can get it once and then you can get it again. And yeah, like, and I think there is a concern with that with Durant, but like, then why would you allow him to play and allow the game to go on? Like, why the inconsistent? Like, I just can't wrap my brain around it. I really can't. And then, you get into the All-Star game, and then you're going to have an All-Star game play. Like, what if this happened there and all these guys are coming from different teams? It makes absolutely no sense. Like, I don't know.
Let's discuss that aspect of it too, because like you mentioned, it was announced that there will be an All-Star game early March. And LeBron comes out a few days ago and says he wants no part of it. He said physically he'll be there, but mentally he won't be. Giannis comes out yesterday, and this quote I thought was fascinating. He said, "We got to follow the big man. We got to follow the king of the house," and said, if he doesn't want to, we don't want to. And I agree with all of them. Like you mentioned, like it is a pandemic, and I think there should be voting for an All-Star game because I think the accolades enough
That honor
should be honored. But what are we doing with an All-Star game, man? Like these people have families that they don't really get to see right now because they're playing in the NBA, because they're putting themselves at risk to make money, and they really have to isolate themselves from their entire families during all of this process. And on top of that, these guys are going to want a 5 or 6 day break in early March to really recharge because, I mean, especially in like LeBron's case, when the NBA Finals happened only a few months before the season started, like it's a quick turnaround for a guy who's 36 and a lot of guys in general. So to me, it really doesn't make much sense to have it. Personally, like it would have been cool to play this game just because like I think the way they've adjusted the All-Star game in the last few years has been really awesome. I mean, the last All-Star game was the most competitive one I've ever seen in any sport, let alone just the NBA. Like do the Elam ending, play to a certain, like those guys cared. And that's why it's cool. And that's why, like, listen, deep inside, like would I watch it? Absolutely. And who wouldn't? But come on, like Adam Silver, take into a fact, like I'm a big Adam Silver guy. I think he's probably the best commissioner in sports, but like, let's be real here. This is entirely a money grab. And
yeah, I mean, to me, it's like also like you said, it was a great All-Star game. Like the players aren't going to be in it this year. Like there's no way they're going to try that much. Like they want to break as it is. So you think they're really going to go hard on, just an exhibition game? I don't think they're going to. And it's like the NBA, I mean, Adam Silver has done a great job at marketing the game. Like that's what an All-Star game is about marketing the game. They probably don't need that this year. I mean, like they're on a good point. They market their stars extremely well. I mean, you can watch basketball on a Friday night, Saturday night, and you'll see a lot of stars. Like if you just turn on ESPN, like for this season, I think that's enough. And again, like making these guys play, it really feels like a money grab. And I don't know how many people, like, I feel like All-Star games, obviously you're going to get the NBA fans to watch it. You're going to get, those type of people, but who are you bringing in from that game? I don't think really anyone extra.
It's so dumb though, just because like you don't even let them like dap each other off after games. Like, you can't exchange jerseys anymore. Like I just don't understand the logic behind anything the NBA is doing right now that involves the pandemic. Like, yes, like it's great that they're having a season and it's great that we're able to watch NBA basketball every night, but like these guys are touching each other the entire game, probably sweating on each other for the most part. Not probably, definitely sweating on each other for the most part. And then at the end of the games, it's just like, nah, you can't dap each other up. You can't like say good game and whatnot. Like you just wave goodbye to the other team. Like you've been playing socially distanced bingo for the last 60 minutes. And it doesn't make sense to me. But I think behind the All-Star game, like you don't want them to do this stuff in a normal game. Yet you want to bring everyone together from all these different cities, put them in one spot where probably not going to be fans. Like, it makes no sense. I hope they reverse the decision. And I have confidence Adam Silver will do what's right for the players and put them in a position that is good. But it's just a weird time to be an NBA fan. Really, really weird.
Yeah, it's just I don't think they're playing this game, especially after LeBron went out and said it. Like once LeBron says it, it's like, okay, like this.
When the
game's
king
not happening.
speaks,
yeah,
he carries a lot of weight in the NBA, and that's what's cool about the NBA at the same time is that, listen, if something happens, the players speak their minds, and the players have influence, and that's not the case in many other leagues. Like, definitely not the case in the NHL. NFL is growing slightly, but never going to happen with Roger Goodell at the helm. And the way those owners operate. Baseball, man, don't even get me started with.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah, we're not going to go there. But what is cool about the NBA is that the players have a ton of influence on the game, and I'm sure this will end up figuring itself out, and we'll see what ends up happening. But just past 12:45 here on One-on-One, Heil and Gulata taking you till 2 in the morning here on Super Bowl Sunday. We're getting ready for the big game. We'll have our picks later. Kayla will join us for that segment as well. But again, we're not done with NBA talk. Alex Kennedy coming up in a few minutes. Me and Alex Woles, our producer, had the chance to talk to him yesterday about a wide variety of NBA topics, but we'll talk to him. We'll have more NFL headlines, our favorite prop bets, and our picks. Like we mentioned, a lot to go here on One-on-One. Glad you can join us on 90.7 FM and Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and stick with us. We just got about over an hour and 15 minutes left, and we're glad you guys can join us. But once again, Alex Kennedy, we'll be right back.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
New York's longest running sports call-in show, Jackson Heil. Alex Woles here with you, and a pleasure to be joined by Alex Kennedy of basketballnews.com. Alex, we really appreciate you taking the time. How's everything going?
Going well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, before we get into any basketball, we do know that you are a big Tampa Bay Bucks fan, and Sunday is approaching fast. What's the emotions been like for you this week as you get ready for probably the biggest game of your life as a fan?
I'm excited. It's been nothing but misery as a Bucks fan in recent years. They find cruel ways to just destroy me and find ways to lose. So it's been a rough couple of years. If you had told me a year ago that we'd be in the Super Bowl, I would have said you're crazy. So it still feels pretty surreal. I'm not going to lie, but I'm really excited. I think this team is at full strength for the first time in pretty much the entire season. We've had injuries all year long that we've dealt with. So I'm very excited. I think it will be a close game. It's possible I'm wrong and that Patrick Mahomes just destroys us and that my Sunday night is miserable, but I'm hopeful. I think it'll be a close game at the very least.
Well, that's what I was going to say. From the beginning, I actually going to mention it. I've been on the Bucks bandwagon. I picked them in the Super Bowl. So I'm with you all the way here. So let me ask you. I'm going to ask you for a pick. Who wins the game? Do you think that your Bucks are going to pull it out, or you think the Chiefs? You mentioned it a little bit there. You think they're going to take this one?
I would not be surprised if the Chiefs won, but I am picking the Bucks. I think the pass rush is the big factor here, the big X factor. The Chiefs line is depleted. We know that. We saw what the Bucks were able to do against Aaron Rodgers and what they've done all season long. I mean, they do such a great job of not only getting sacks and knockdowns, but forcing the quarterbacks into rushing their passes, making mistakes. The secondary is the Bucs' weakness. They've been playing much better recently. Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean. The safety's been playing much better. So that's that. I think when the pass rush is playing as well as they are, it helps the secondary. The big thing is going to be shutting down Tyreek Hill. We all know what he did in Week 12 last time they faced off. So I think the both offenses are obviously two of the best in the NFL. They can score any drive. They can, score on long plays. They can score in a second. I think the defense, that's where the Bucs have the advantage. I think even though the Chiefs defense is pretty solid, they do a good job shutting down wide receivers. I think the fact that the Bucs, they have a historically good run defense. So I don't think that Kansas City will be able to do much on the ground. And I think the difference is going to be that pass rush with JPP, Sue, Vita Vea, Shaq Barrett. They've been playing really well all season long. They had 5 sacks against Aaron Rodgers, 11 knockdowns. So I think that could be the difference maker here. So yeah, I'm going Bucks. Every time, I don't have an exact score, but I think it's going to be, a 1-point game, a 3-point game, something really close. I think it'll be an awesome game. Even if you're not a Bucks fan or a Chiefs fan, it should be really exciting, high scoring, one of the Super Bowls that hopefully years from now we're all looking back on and talking about.
Wow, so I wish you the best of luck with that. I mean, as someone who's been on the wrong side of New York sports fandom, it is a tough life. So I'm wishing you all the best there for the Bucks. And let's shift over to the NBA side of things. And I want to talk about LeBron James first and foremost, because last night puts up another 25-point performance. I mean, another triple-double, 27, 10, and 10 against the Nuggets. They were down 12 at half, and I think they ended up winning the game by 20. It's just pretty remarkable what the Lakers have been able to do. But at the age of 36, LeBron James just continues to get better and better. I mean, he's shooting 41% from three this year on nearly 7 attempts per game. I mean, if you told me that 10 years ago with the way LeBron shot the three, I think you'd probably call me crazy. But the fact that he's been able to just continue to get better is just remarkable. What have you made of his ability to do this at age 36? And how long do you think that he can continue this?
Yeah, I mean, whatever LeBron's doing and Tom Brady is doing, we just need to figure that out, bottle it up, give it to our veteran athletes so that they can just keep playing amazing for, years and years and keep Father Time away. I don't know how he does it. LeBron's incredible. I mean, I do think part of it, and you look at both of these players, part of it is their dedication to getting treatment. We actually just had Phil Handy on basketballnews.com, one of our podcasts. He was on with James Posey, and he talked about how LeBron goes to bed early every single night, prioritizes his treatment. He'll cancel plans and he'll bail on plans if it means he has to get his treatment done. And if he can't prioritize that, they're both crazy about their nutrition, their sleep schedule, things like that. Those things are very important, and it leads to that kind of longevity and durability. I've been so impressed with LeBron's play. To be able to do this at his age is incredible. He said last night after the game that he feels like he's better than last year and is playing some of his best basketball in recent years. So it is amazing. And with LeBron, he's done such a good job of developing his game and evolving his game over time. When he went to Miami, it was moving to the 4 and adding post moves and becoming more versatile as a scorer and, being able to do more on the block. Then we saw him, now with the 3-point shot, he's been able to do that over time as well. And, he always was getting better as a 3-point shooter, but nothing like we've seen this year. This is his best shooting year of his career. And I know at one point, people were saying, oh, he's settling for too many threes. And, that was kind of the knock that, he should have been driving more. But now, I mean, with the way that his shot is falling, it's hard to argue with the results. So not only that, averaging 10.2 assists per game, he's always been so amazing at, facilitating, getting others involved. And the scariest part of all is you look at this Lakers team and it doesn't feel like they're even playing at 100%. It feels like they're kind of easing their way into the season because they had obviously very little time off after winning the NBA championship, then the shortened off season. Now you have the condensed schedule. So it feels like, Anthony Davis is playing at like 80%. They're still getting guys acclimated like Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder. LeBron's playing really well, but it feels like this Lakers team, we haven't even seen their best basketball yet, which is pretty scary to think of. We've seen it in some spurts and seen what they could be. And I think that's why everyone is, looking at them as the favorite and other teams are so scared of them. But yeah, it's been incredible. And LeBron's a huge reason for that. You asked when this will end and, when we'll see Father Time ultimately beat him. I don't know. I feel like it's very hard to bet against LeBron. So it would not surprise me if he has another 3-4 years of this left, because again, he'll continue to evolve. He'll find a way to, he's always going to be able to have a huge impact when he's on the floor, even if his athleticism goes, even if he's not as explosive. He's, because of his passing, his basketball IQ, his shooting, he will find a way to be productive. He's one of those guys that's out there yelling out the other team's play, when he's on defense, and just causing so many problems with his basketball IQ and his memory. So he's phenomenal. And I would not be surprised if he could keep this up for another 2-3 years, but he can play as long as he wants because he's going to still have an impact, even late in his career.
You mentioned that the Lakers almost kind of like on cruise control right now, finding their own this season. And there's 2 other teams that I think are right there with them. And that's the Clippers kind of finding their own between Kawhi and Paul George. And it's the Utah Jazz sitting right at the top of the West. Do you think it's a 3-team race really in the West between those 3 teams? Or you think there's some bottom feeders that can maybe compete with the Lakers and others here?
Honestly, right now, if I had to rank it, I would say the Lakers are probably on a tier of their own. Then I'd have the Clippers on a tier. And then that third tier would be Utah, Denver, Probably those two. And it's not that Utah isn't a talented team. I think they're a great team in the regular season, and they're winning a lot of games right now, and they look really good. I think one thing that's helped them is their continuity. In a season like this with the condensed schedule, the continuity is so important, especially because the teams that are adding new players or have added new players, they don't have practices. Teams really have limited practice time this year. Teams aren't doing walkthroughs on the mornings of games. And then guys can't really hang out off the floor to bond like we'd see in a normal offseason or a normal season because of the COVID rules and protocols. So you don't have a chance to go out to eat with your teammates and hang out at each other's houses and, get on the same page. So I think that teams like Utah that have that continuity, we see it a little bit with, Philly, even the Lakers. I mean, yeah, they have Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder, but most of their core is back. I feel like those teams that have that continuity and chemistry already established have an advantage. So while I think Utah is a very good regular season team, and I could see them making some noise in the playoffs, I don't know if they're a legitimate championship contender just yet. I love the Clippers, though. Even though I had the Lakers ahead of them and on a tier above them, this Clippers team is very scary. I think, last year everyone wanted to rush to crown them because they were, they were the offseason winners and they were kind of the sexy pick, but they needed time to get chemistry. And last year we saw the whole load management approach it blew up in their face because come playoff time, these guys didn't have enough minutes together and they didn't have that chemistry down. Now we're seeing, Kawhi Leonard's playing back-to-backs and playing more games. Paul George, he's not resting games. Obviously they've dealt with some injuries here and there, and they had the COVID issue that limited those guys a little bit. But I think this team's playing excellent basketball, and some of their their offseason pickups like Serge Ibaka and Nick Batum, they've stepped up so much, and they've been huge difference makers for this team. So I like this Clippers squad a lot. I think we're going to see Lakers Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, and I think that's going to be an amazing series. I think both teams are also going to be very active too before the trade deadline, after the buyout season begins, and we know which veterans hit the market. Just like last year, we saw the Lakers add Markieff Morris, Clippers added Reggie Jackson. I think we're definitely going to see both these teams very active, and their window is wide open right now. They feel like this is their chance to win a championship, so we're going to see them be aggressive.
Speaking with Alex Kennedy, Chief Content Officer for basketballnews.com. Be sure to check out the website. A lot of great content there, a lot of great podcasts as well. Alex, let's shift over to the East, because I think the East is probably there's not that clear-cut team necessarily yet, but the Nets are certainly making their way there with the addition of James Harden. Since then, they've been really interesting because offensively, they look like one of the best teams of all time, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, on the defensive end of the floor. What do you make of this Brooklyn Nets team right now, and do you think this is a team that can contend with the Lakers and Clippers for a title? Obviously, you think they might get there in the end, but can they contend with their lack of ability to play defense?
As currently constructed, I don't think they have a chance to compete for a championship this year. Again, going back to what I was talking about with the Clippers, they're kind of that team this year that everyone wants to crown because of how good they are on paper, but it takes time to develop that chemistry and get everyone on the same page, especially in a year like this where, again, you don't have the practice time. You're not bonding off the floor. This is kind of the worst year to try to get three focal points of an offense on the same page, three superstars, just because of all the circumstances surrounding the season. So they have a tough challenge. And it's also, you throw in the fact that this is Steve Nash's first time as a head coach, his first time as a coach, period, if you don't count his player development stint in Golden State. So there's a lot of things that are against them. And I think the way I look at it with Brooklyn, I think this is a year to get everyone on the same page, develop the chemistry. I do think they're going to go on a deep playoff run because they have that kind of talent. Come playoff time, good luck guarding Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. They're going to go on a playoff run. The question is, how deep can they go and can they actually contend? It's possible they could make a move. Again, we talked about the buyout market. There's really not a lot out there in terms of free agents when we're talking about big men they could add, guys that can help defensively. Now, I will say it's always easier to add defensive help than it is offensive help. Offensive firepower and star players, those are hard to come by. So they have plenty of those, which is great. Defensive players, you can acquire them a bit cheaper. We've seen that. They're not valued as much around the NBA. So maybe it's possible they could pull off a trade and improve that defense. Maybe we see someone a big man get bought out or some defensive specialist get bought out. And that's kind of the answer for them. We saw them bring in Norvel Pell and Iman Shumpert. I'm not sure those guys are the answers. I'm not sure they can, make a big enough impact defensively. So I would say, right now, as much as I love their offense and I'm terrified of, if I'm a team, I'm terrified of facing them in the playoffs. I do feel like defensively, they have too many issues. I don't trust DeAndre Jordan. I think he's, really struggled, and he's played well in some games. Like you look at the Milwaukee Bucks game, and he was able to give Giannis some trouble with his length and stop him in transition and the half court. He clearly is still very strong, but we know he's not the same player, and he can't do that night after night consistently, and he can't play big minutes either. So they have to do something. If they don't make a move, that's where I have concerns about this Nets team. But Sean Marks has said they're still being very aggressive. They're going to look at the buyout market. They're going to look at the trade market. They're going to see what's out there. Even a guy like Dwayne Dedmon, who's out there right now, he could be a really interesting addition for them. I think he could help. I'm bummed they didn't sign Kyle O'Quinn. He was a free agent that was available as of 2 weeks ago, but then he signed over in Turkey, so he's overseas now. Maybe when his season ends overseas, he could be an option. So I'm curious to see what they do, but those are some of my concerns right now. But I will say, even if they're not a contender this year, or if the defensive issues are too much this year, this is a team that next season is going to be very scary and might be the favorite to win it all, because this offseason, they can address those defensive needs. They can address their front court depth. They can enter next season with everyone on the same page. And they could look like the Lakers or Clippers do right now, where, they're just rolling. And it's because of this year they spent together kind of getting everyone acclimated.
I think one player and one team who's looking at that lack of front court depth, that lack of size, and saying, this is great for me, is Joel Embiid in the 76ers, because he's a guy right now who's playing at an incredible level. I mean, just the other day dropped 25 in a single quarter. I mean, he's playing just insane basketball right now. Looking at this Brooklyn team and probably saying, this is great, I can take advantage of this. What do you think the Sixers' chances are this year? I mean, they kind of made this huge peak this year, and what Embiid's improvements. Do you think they have a real shot at being a finals contender and taking advantage of a team like Brooklyn?
Yeah, as of right now, I think Philly's my favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference. I really believe in this team. I think Embiid's playing out of his mind. He's doing it on both ends too. He's scoring the ball so well. He's scoring even better, in mid-range and shooting the ball. But we've also seen defensively, he's been just so dominant. If you watch him play, he's just shutting teams down and getting so many deflections, and he makes his presence felt all over the floor. So I've been so impressed with Embiid. I think he's someone that could potentially, challenge LeBron James for the MVP this year. If he was playing every game, because they do limit him a little bit still, that would help his argument a bit more. But, he's right there. When his games when he's on, it's hard to argue against his impact and, his value out there. So I've been so impressed with Embiid. And then I loved what the Sixers did over the offseason, addressing their lack of shooting, going after Seth Curry, who hasn't looked like himself recently. I don't know if it's because he's still dealing with the effects of COVID, but he was phenomenal in the beginning of the year. And you're seeing how much Dallas is missing him right now too, and his spacing. He's been terrific, and I think he's going to get back. I think once his conditioning is back, he'll be, able to contribute at a high level again. We saw what they added with Danny Green. So I think the Sixers team, they were always talented. For whatever reason, Tobias Harris plays his best basketball under Doc Rivers. Doc is able to unleash him. He's been fantastic. I do think he'll come back down to earth a little bit, but I think Doc and him, for whatever reason, they do a great job together. So Tobias is playing well. Ben Simmons has struggled a bit at times. He's obviously fantastic defensively. He's a good facilitator. But if he can take the next step, this team could be even scarier. So I think with Philly, we haven't seen their best basketball yet, which is pretty scary considering, they're atop the Eastern Conference right now. But yeah, I think right now I have Philly as my favorite to come out of the East. Those issues that Brooklyn has, there's not a glaring issue like there is for Brooklyn. And I think the chemistry is there because we've seen them in past seasons, go on these playoff runs and develop that. And I think it takes time to kind of have that. So the continuity is there, the chemistry is there. So right now, Philly's my pick. And then again, Brooklyn next year, I'm looking at them as the top team in the East. But I think this year is going to be tough for them. Again, because if they do run into Philly, who's going to stop Joel Embiid? That's going to just be a ridiculous series for him.
Alex Kennedy of basketballnews.com joining us now. Alex, just a few more before we let you go. I want to give you a trade proposal and see what you think on this one, because there's a few guys that I think could obviously shake up the trade market, one potentially being Victor Oladipo, but the other is a superstar in Washington who is going nuts this year in Bradley Beal. What are your thoughts on Bradley Beal to Denver?
That's interesting. I think Denver has been aggressive in recent years, looking to make a move for a star. They were in the mix for a number of different star players. And this goes back years. They were trying to get Kevin Love years ago. I remember like Rudy Gay was available years ago. They've been super aggressive over the years and trying to trade for star players, because I think they know they're not the destination that free agents are going to automatically pick. So they've tried to, be active in a lot of different trade talks, and in recent years too. Now, I don't know that Bradley Beal is going to get traded. I will say that, he has not requested a trade. He has said that he's okay staying. And I know Adrian Wojnarowski and some others have said that they don't think there's a trade happening this year, that the earliest we probably see a Bradley Beal trade happen is the offseason, whenever the Wizards and Beal can kind of sit down and figure out, okay, do we have a long-term future? What moves can we make to potentially turn this thing around? Or do we have to trade you? So I don't know that we see a Beal trade this offseason, or this season, unfortunately, because I think that would be very interesting. You look at a number of teams. Miami's another one that's been mentioned as a possibility. As far as how Beal would fit with the Nuggets, it makes a lot of sense. I would just love to see him, playing with Jokic, and that offense would be so exciting. It'd be so much fun to watch that team. Jamal Murray too. I mean, we've seen what he can do when he's healthy. Right now he's dealing with a number of injuries, but that backcourt would be tremendous as well. Now, I don't know. I think if the Wizards do get to the point where they decide to trade Bradley Beal, it's going to cost a ton to acquire him, just because he's leading the league in scoring. He's one of those guys too that he can fit with any team around the NBA. So it's not like he has a very specific skill set where you have to have the right pieces around him and he has to be in the right offense or things like that. Because he can shoot the ball so well and he's so versatile and he's improved so much, you can put him on pretty much any team and he's going to be just as effective. He's going to be, maybe not put up the same points because he'll have other players he has to share the ball with, but just his skill set would pretty much fit anywhere. So that makes it tough, where if you're Washington, you should be able to create a bidding war for his services, which means if you're a team like Denver or Miami or one of these teams that want to trade for him, you're probably going to be giving up a lot. So I'm curious to see what happens with Beal, even if it's not this season, maybe it's the offseason. I think all eyes are kind of on that situation to see where he might end up.
Despite the way the Wizards have looked this year, at least he's getting the All-Star nods, getting the respect that he deserves. And one guy who's not getting that respect, I think, is Julius Randle. And I don't think we can go here without asking your opinion about the Knicks, because Julius Randle's been playing terrific basketball this year. The Knicks themselves playing pretty well from what we're used to seeing. And I think our market here interested to know your thoughts about not only how the teams perform this year, but maybe just their direction in the future. Are they heading in the right direction now with some young talent and obviously Randle's a resurgence?
Yeah, I love it. I've been so impressed with Julius Randle. I got to know Randle when he was in high school. So I've kind of watched his development over the years, and I've never seen him play like this, where he's facilitating like this. He's shooting the ball really well. He's so locked in, and credit to him for, what he's been able to do this year, because putting up those kind of numbers consistently is very difficult, especially once teams know that you're kind of the focal point and they can kind of key in on you and game plan for you and study your tendencies. So I've been so impressed with Randle, and this Knicks team as a whole quickly looks fantastic. And it's funny because on draft night, people were criticizing that pick and saying, that he shouldn't have went there and they didn't like his ceiling and all these different things, but he's been fantastic. I've been so impressed with him, and just when he's on, and it's been a lot of fun watching him. We actually wrote an article at Basketball News the other day about Quickly and how he gives Knicks fans hope, because not only because of how he's playing and he looks like the real deal, but he also gives hope that maybe the Knicks in this new regime can actually draft and develop talent over the years. I think, maybe a year ago or a few years ago, we would have seen the Knicks try to make a trade for Russell Westbrook or a trade for Chris Paul, like some of the things that were rumored over the offseason, taking on the big contract to try to lure a savior free agent. That's always been their MO. Instead, we see they kept their draft picks. They're focusing on the young core. They're, bringing in a good coaching staff and developing young guys. And I think we've seen, that's kind of the key to turning the corner as a franchise in the NBA these days, because A, it leads to you having these young prospects that can potentially become a star on their own. And B, the teams that have been able to land some of these superstars have done it because they develop a nice young core that is able to attract free agents. Now, if you're in New York, you always want to have free agency as an option and have cap space and that flexibility, because you're always going to be a player in free agency. It's different than if you're in Indiana or OKC, where they know they're not going to be a player in free agency. But if they can have a nice young core and they can develop and have Randle, Quickly, RJ Barrett and some of these guys, then it makes it easier to attract a free agent in the next few years once they kind of see what this team is, what the culture is. I mean, we saw with Brooklyn, they kind of were this young, scrappy team that fought their way into the playoffs and developed this culture, and ultimately that attracted Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. We saw it with the Clippers. They were able to turn the corner and went from laughing stock after Lob City, of course, to to be able to be the scrappy team with a number of young pieces. Or the other option is the Lakers route, where they basically developed their young guys, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Hart, and then traded some of them in order to acquire a star. So I like the fact that we see the Knicks developing their young players and not trying to make the skip the line move for a Westbrook or a Chris Paul or one of these big contracts that would, kill their flexibility going forward. So I think the Knicks are headed in the right direction. I love what they're doing, and I love this young core. I did not expect to be this high on the Knicks or watching New York basketball as much as I have been this year entering the season, but I've been very impressed.
Alex, before we let you go, just want to give you a chance to pub the new site, basketballnews.com. Obviously, you were at Hoops Hype for a while, but you've made the transition. You guys are doing a great job there. And just saw you added a new podcast with Kenyon Martin and Jadakiss. Tell us about the content you guys are putting out there right now.
Yeah, basically, every day we pump out exclusive articles. We also have a podcast network that has 12 different shows. You mentioned, Kenyon and Jadakiss have a show on there. James Posey has a show. Atan Thomas has a show. I have my podcast on there. And then we have a number of other ones as well. The Dunker Spot with Nikias Duncan and Steve Jones Jr., who's a former coach. We have a lot of podcasts on our network, and every day there's new episodes coming out. And then, every day we put out a bunch of articles too, exclusive interviews. We have breaking news, the latest rumors, in-depth analysis. And then eventually too, we want to get into long form video, so documentaries and web series and things like that. So I'm very excited. It's been awesome. It's been cool to kind of have not only the journalists that are on our staff, but then also have that player-driven content, which has been blowing up in recent years. Things like the Players Tribune and these player-driven podcasts, people seem to really have an appetite for it. So we have a lot of those things. So it's kind of a hybrid of different websites. It's basketballnews.com. Definitely check us out.
Like you said, you can find it all at basketballnews.com. Alex, we really appreciate you taking the time today. Best of luck with everything going forward with your site, and obviously best of luck this weekend with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
And so, guys, we're going to get into a little bit of NFL talk, but not about the Super Bowl. We're going to talk a little bit about how free agent season, although it is not officially started, it has not begun yet, there are still a lot of trade rumors and speculation about free agency that's going on. And two notable characters in this are Carson Wentz and Jameis Winston. So Winston played backup for the Saints this past year, and there's been a lot of conversation about if Breeze retires, will they choose Jameis Winston? I know that Sean Payton has already said that he is excited about keeping him on the roster and that he wants to make a deal with him. And so, Andrew, I know that you're a huge Saints fan, so I want to get your thoughts on this. Do you want him back next year? How do you see this working out?
Yeah, I think I want Winston back for sure. I think he deserves a shot to battle with Taysom Hill for the starting job. And I mean, look, obviously I'm not Sean Payton, but I just would like to see Winston in that offense with the Saints just to see how he's grown. I think he has grown past the 30 interceptions in 2019, and he just has so much talent. And I think he'll sign another one-year deal with the Saints and try to parlay that into a long-term deal. And I feel like his best chance at getting that long-term deal ever will be with the Saints, just because they have the great coach. They have the good weapons. They have the good defense. And I would just love to see what he's got, because you look at like some of his highlights and you're like, wow, he's throwing the ball 50 yards downfield. I mean, the last time a Saints fan has seen that is not a long time. It's been a very long time. It's like at least 2016 back with Breeze. And I mean, that arm is just so good. And him and Taysom Hill, I think, are both intriguing. But just because I think we saw Taysom Hill, I saw what he is, I'd rather now see Winston. And I think that he ends up signing with the Saints. I think he goes into a QB battle, and I think he actually wins it.
See, this is what's interesting to me, because I look at what we saw for the Saints last year and Sean Payton, and I think he has a complete love affair with Taysom Hill. And listen, I'm not sure if I buy the theory entirely that they were hiding him. I'm curious to hear what you have to say in a second on this. But I read a theory, and you mentioned it yesterday when we were doing our pre-production meeting, that Sean Payton was hiding Jameis Winston this year, which listen, I don't know if that sounds crazy to me. Like that sounds crazy to me, just given how much we've seen Sean Payton just be in love with Taysom Hill since he's been here. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a fan of Taysom Hill. I think he can play. I think he's an asset. But the fact that Taysom Hill was the starting quarterback when Breeze went down, I think is impossible to ignore. And for that reason, I really hesitate to think that Jameis Winston will be the starting quarterback next year. And I think that's clearly the better option, is to go with Jameis over Taysom Hill. That's where I'm at in this situation, because I think he's a great fit for that offense. But, man, I can't get off the thought that Sean Payton is going to give Jameis Winston a starting job over Taysom Hill after what I've seen through his first, 2 to 3 years now.
The thing with, I don't think, I bet it was partly he was trying to hide him. I don't think it was fully. I mean, Sean Payton's I wouldn't put it past him. He's the guy that puts cheese in people's locker rooms to say, don't eat the cheese after they rank you really high in like the power rankings or anything. So he is definitely a guy that will do some crazy things. This would definitely be the craziest to not play the better quarterback if that's how he truly thought. He said, though, to Taysom, he promised him the job to at least go 4 games. And when Breeze got hurt. And I think the big thing with Sean Payton, he wanted to see Taysom Hill in the starting job. He got to see Jameis Winston 70 starts, and he got to evaluate all that, the good, the bad, the ugly with Jameis Winston, but he wanted to see what Hill had. And I feel like also Hill knew the playbook better at that point. And I think Sean Payton wanted that evaluation process, and now he has that. And now you go into the next season, most likely without Drew Brees, who's most likely not going to come back. I mean, at this point, I think he'll retire after the Super Bowl, not official yet, but I don't know. I feel like Jameis has all that potential, and also Sean Payton's been gushing over Jameis Winston. He's saying he has huge interest, and he wants him in this room, and he wants to keep progressing with him and getting better. Like, he's talking about him like he's on the roster already, and it's free agency.
If he's gushing over Jameis Winston like this, and he actually felt this way about him, why wouldn't he start last year? Because at the same time, listen, I get you saw Jameis Winston in Tampa Bay, and I get you have a better read on him, what he is as a quarterback as opposed to Taysom Hill. But you're talking about Drew Brees' last season. If you really wanted Drew Brees to go out with a win, like with a bang, and win a Super Bowl, their best chance was to play Jameis Winston during that stretch and win as many games as possible. Because let's be honest, I thought last year their best chance to win games as a whole was putting in Jameis Winston over Drew Brees. And we've had that conversation before, and I'm not going to get fully into it. But I thought it was pretty clear last year that Jameis Winston was the best quarterback on that roster at that time. And when Brees went down, if you want to give Drew Brees one last ride, I completely understand that. Like, it's admirable, and like, it was the right thing to do, probably in all likelihood, for a guy who's given so much to that organization, so much to that city. Like, I can get behind that. But if you really mean that, then winning is priority number one. And he clearly thought in that spot, at least from my perspective, that Taysom Hill gave them a better chance to win over Jameis Winston. That's how I see it. I could be wrong, and listen, I don't know what direction this is going to go in, just because Sean Payton confuses the crap out of me sometimes with decisions like this. But I'm not gonna question it, because the guy gets the job done, and whatever happens ends up happening. So we'll see what transpires. But man, from what I've seen, I'd be stunned if Taysom Hill isn't playing a massive role in that offense, and one of those roles being quarterback.
I think prepare to be stunned. That's all I'll say. Prepare to be stunned because I think Sean Payton, I think he wanted to see, because I think in practice, the theory of Taysom Hill, if you look at Taysom Hill, like maybe if he ever progressed into like a quarterback that can actually read zone defenses, doesn't fumble the ball like 3 times a game, and could actually throw on the run. Like if he ever fixed those issues, I think he could definitely be a franchise quarterback. But at this point in his career, I see that probably being highly unlikely. But you didn't know these flaws. Like he only fumbled once in the past 2 seasons, but only when he was put in the starting role. You saw the fumbling issue. You saw that he just can't read zone defenses. And also he holds the ball on way too long. And he doesn't throw on the run great, which is, you would think Taysom Hill would throw on the run great, but he doesn't. So but you wouldn't have known those things. Like in theory, the Taysom Hill.
I felt like it was pretty obvious that you did know those things because it's pretty clear he wasn't a quarterback. Like,
I don't
is
think
that
it was
not true?
obvious.
I thought it was pretty damn obvious. I think it was obvious to me based on the fact that like when you brought him out of college, you drafted him not to be a quarterback. Like they drafted him to be a all-purpose utility guy on the offensive end that can play pretty much every skill position.
Well,
it was listen, and I get he's a quarterback in college, but like just watch the tape. Like it wasn't that hard to figure out that he couldn't do these things, I think, in my opinion. And I could be wrong again, but like, did they really need 4 NFL games to figure that out when you got a guy in Jameis Winston who's clearly a better quarterback and clearly a better fit for that system in there? I thought it was an easy decision at the time to go to Winston, but like I said, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I like what Andrew said about how they were trying to give Taysom Hill a chance at being the quarterback to see what he does with it, because they didn't know what Winston would do like with an offense and how he ran one, and they were giving Taysom Hill just that NFL like league to let him see how he does, how he leads the team. So it might have just been a trial run, but it definitely Sean Payton's giving mixed messages because he's like he has an allegiance to Taysom Hill, but at the same time he's like, I love Jameis Winston and I will be Jameis Winston. So there's definitely like an interesting thing, and it'll be interesting, I think, if Winston like wants to go back, you know, like if he, I don't know, in free agency, he could have a choice of another place and another team that maybe it wouldn't be such a competition for him, like to be backup quarterback.
I would say the only team would be the Colts.
Yeah.
They have an offense, like they have a good system around him. Like if I were him, I'd stay far away from Chicago. Like you're going to be a career backup if you do that.
That's a death sentence.
Yeah. Like I'd rather, like Teddy Bridgewater did the same thing. He could have went to the Dolphins and take Fitzpatrick's role basically. And he could have done that. He ended up staying with the Saints for a little less money, started those 5 games and parlayed it into $60 million. And, you know, I feel like Winston would do something similar. And also he's not even sitting behind a Drew Brees. He would have a chance to beat out Taysom Hill, which I think in all likelihood, I think is going to end up happening. I really do. You said you'd be shocked. I really don't. Sean Payton, I think he was even talking about, he's like in practices, Jameis's arm was it was so big and it was showed off, and the defense was struggling against it. I was like, well, yeah, but I think the Taysom Hill experiment in Sean Payton's mind was like, he could throw from the pocket, he can run for 100 yards, he could bowl people over. And I think in theory, Taysom Hill in Sean Payton's mind was like, oh, he's going to be this star Lamar Jackson type player. But you had to see him in actual games to figure out his weaknesses.
But this was the problem. Like Sean Payton gets goosebumps every time he looks at Taysom Hill. Like that's the type of relationship that I think that he has with Taysom Hill, because I don't think there was any reason to think that, because he can't throw the ball. Yes, you can put him in situations where like on a trick play where he can throw it because he was a former quarterback. But like, I don't know. I just thought it was pretty obvious that Taysom Hill wasn't a quarterback going into this all. Like, yeah, I mean, they won some games with them and the offense looked decent because, well, it wasn't Drew Brees, who was pretty miserable last year. But I don't know. Like, if that team wanted to win games last year and wanted to go like make a Super Bowl run, I thought it was pretty obvious their best opportunity to do that was with Jameis Winston, because of his ability to open up the field with those weapons and his ability to make plays in the pocket. But
yeah,
again, I understand why they didn't do it, but at the same time now, like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous to me that like he didn't play in that 4-game stretch, and that said a lot to me. That did.
I kind of want to transition over to speaking of terrible quarterbacks, really. Carson Wentz. Is just he is dead weight really on the Eagles payroll right now. And so there's been a lot of talks, a lot of things have said that there are aggressive offers coming to the Eagles in order to get Carson Wentz. And so Andrew, you had kind of mentioned the Colts earlier as maybe a place for Jameis Winston. And I think that the Colts, while I don't know that they're an actual contender, I think that they're a likely favorite if the Eagles do end up trading Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I feel like favorite, like, I don't know how many teams actually want Carson Wentz. I think the Colts may be the only one, just because, I mean, I don't know. It's such like, I mean, for the Eagles perspective, I mean, if they could get, I don't know what pick they would get, but maybe if they can get a second rounder or something for him, I mean, who knows the amount quarterbacks go for. Maybe they get a first. I don't think so, but who knows? But I don't know. I would sink my cap this year for $33 million, just knowing he's gone. He's done. We can focus on Jalen Hurts and kind of take that 1 year hit. I mean, I think Carson Wentz just needs a change of scenery. I think he has the tools, and maybe with Frank Reich, he can kind of regain the magic and go back for it. I mean, I wouldn't say it's likely, but I think it's possible. But if I was the Colts, I mean, that's such a good team. You're going to put your eggs in Carson Wentz's basket. I mean, I don't know if I'd do that either.
At the same time, this was a good team last year that put their eggs in Phillip Rivers' basket as well. So we get, again, different situation, obviously, but like it wouldn't surprise me if they went the veteran route. I wouldn't want any part of Carson Wentz, personally. I mean, there's so many reasons why, but I think the most important thing, aside from his contract, is the fact that he hasn't looked close to the same quarterback that he was pre-ACL injury. And it stinks because he was awesome before that. Like, he was well on his way to an MVP the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And obviously that injury happens, and he hasn't been the same since. And I think the interesting thing to me about him is, like, it hasn't been the legs that have been the issue. It's been an accuracy issue. Like, I mean, he can't make the simplest of throws anymore. And that, to me, is really weird because an ACL injury shouldn't affect that. But sometimes when you're not playing football for that long, I guess it just completely has rattled his rhythm and whatnot. And yes, he's had other injuries too that have gone along with this, but it's really been a stark difference since that big time injury happened. So for that reason, I wouldn't want any part of Carson Wentz. If the only reason I'm taking him on is if the Eagles somehow cut bait with him. And then you can sign him to a 1 year deal. In that case, I think any team would be really dumb to trade for him because that contract is an atrocity. And the only way like that anything is going to get figured out is if there's a significant restructure, which if you're in Wentz's shoes, why would you ever restructure at this point? Because you're never going to make that much money again, in all likelihood, unless he has a mental resurgence and comes like the reincarnation of what he used to be. But I don't see any reason to trade for Carson Wentz right now, if I'm any team, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this. His contract is a beast. It was in 2019, it was a 4-year, $128 million extension. So any new team would be taking on like a $25 million. They'd be paying him like $25 million in salary. And his value is so low right now. Like, he was just statistically like one of the worst quarterbacks in this season. And so, like, either way, like, he doesn't want to stay in Philadelphia. He has mentioned that he had a strained relationship with Doug Peterson. And even though Peterson was fired now, I don't think that the new hiring of Nick Sirianni is really making much of a difference on their relationship. I don't think that he wants to stay and he wants to work with him. I mean, I don't think he has any interest in being a backup quarterback, but it would be a terrible contract for any team to take on. I mean, it's a lot of money. And the Eagles said that they'd be open to trade if it was like fair value. But what do they consider fair value for a quarterback like that? Like, someone like Philly sports writers suggest that they want like a first round pick for him in a trade, that they would want a first round pick. And I just don't know that anyone would be willing to give that.
I think anyone that's willing to take him on is fair value at this point. Like finding a willing trade partner who would say, hey, we will have Carson Wentz. That is fair in itself. Like, if I'm any team, like, I view this as a Brock Osweiler situation personally. Like, I would say, listen, I want a draft pick if I'm taking on Carson Wentz in his contract. That's what it would take for me as an organization to say, all right, we'll eat this contract, we'll eat the money for a year, but I need a first-round pick along with the fact that the Eagles think that's even a possibility is nuts, like absolutely nuts looking at the way that Carson Wentz has played. And that's why personally I don't think he will get traded, because there's a clear disconnect between the Eagles and other organizations as to what Carson Wentz's value is right now. And listen, that could all be just a bunch of malarkey that they're putting out there. These writers are, and that could just be the Eagles trying to say like, hey, we have offers for him, and trying to drive up a price that maybe doesn't exist. But at the same time, if that's the truth, which I have a hard time believing right now because of just what Wentz has been recently, he's not getting traded anytime soon. The only thing that's going to happen with him and his Eagles future is he's a backup or he's getting cut. It's one of those two solutions for me.
Yeah, and Jackson, you talked about how you say pre-ACL injury he was great, an MVP type player. I think that you could talk about the ACL injury, but I talk about how good that Eagles team was. And Nick Foles won the Super Bowl. And Nick Foles made some great plays, and he was a gamer in those games. But again, that team was really good, and they were playing really well. And just looking at his stats, I mean, you go back to his 2019 season, they made the playoffs, they went 9-7. Very similar, still 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That year that he was an MVP candidate, he was 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So pretty similar. I know he only played 13 games in 2017, but it's not like it's like blown out of the water. Like that's how good he was. I think had a lot to do with them winning 11 games in 13 tries. And again, I feel like the team got worse, and whether it be injuries or whatever it may happen. And it just showed that he tried to do way too much. Like, I think he could be like an average quarterback, but he tried to do way too much. And then I think his psyche's just all messed up. And maybe Frank Reich can fix that. I mean, that's, I think, like you talked about maybe restructuring his deal. Like if I'm him, if I can restructure to go to the Colts, I'd probably do it, because he's probably the only person at this point that could make me and help me get to that whatever range, maybe top 10, top 12, and get paid again. But that's just kind of what I feel the Carson Wentz situation.
Yeah, and Frank Reich was his old offensive coordinator. So they already have like a connection with one another. And so like if anyone would be able to restore like Wentz to his former glory, like it could be him, And I think that even more so than like his accuracy problems, like you were saying, Jackson, like post ACL injury, his mental game was terrible. Like he had no confidence. He was reading the defense terribly. He was just throwing poorly. He held onto the ball way too long. Like he was a disaster this season. And it wasn't even just his accuracy and like the physical movements. It was his confidence felt like it was shot, and his like mental head game as being a quarterback and reading plays was just not good at all. And so I think that it would be best if he left for his like own mental health and his own self. That it would probably be good if he wasn't at the Eagles organization anymore, because he clearly does not want to still be there. And like, it's Jalen Hurts' team now. It just is. And I think that it'd be dumb to assume otherwise, that Carson Wentz would even have a chance at being the starting quarterback for the upcoming future if they keep him.
It's interesting because I get the connection to Frank Reich, and obviously that's when he was at his best. To me, what's weird is that like you look at Indianapolis and you look at like what their identity has been since he's been there, and it's defense. Like they're defensively have been awesome since he's been there. And listen, I get that Frank Reich would put him in a situation where he's comfortable, he understands the offense, he knows schematically what's going on, but like Indianapolis offensively hasn't been very good, especially last year. Like you look at like what they were able to do, like, and they have a ton of talent. Like I love what they're doing organizationally, but like offensively, they haven't been great. And part of that's because of the quarterback position, because I mean, listen, Phillip Rivers, love him to death. I'm a huge Phillip Rivers guy, but like it was clear he was pretty finished last year. And that was part of the reason that they weren't that good. But like I look at the situation in Indianapolis and like they haven't been great offensively, and I don't know how much Carson Wentz would add to that equation, especially given, Kayla, like what you mentioned about him. Like he just looks shot. Physically, he hasn't been great. He's probably not all that healthy too. Like, I would guess he's been playing through injuries because there really isn't much to explain the difference in over these last 3 years as to what has happened. And especially the stark, like, he completely tanked last year. Like, there's no question about it. Like, he was at least a serviceable quarterback in 2019. I mean, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Like, it's not horrible by any means. Like, that's a starting quarterback in the NFL. But like, last year was a disaster. And for that reason, I think he may not be healthy. And I don't know if he'll ever get healthy, but it'll be weird. It's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening to him for a lot of reasons, but like, I'm rooting for him. Like, I as much as I don't think he has it in him, I'm rooting for Carson Wentz because I think he's been dealt a tough hand in terms of the injuries he's had to go through, playing with basically no weapons in Philadelphia too. Like, let's be completely upfront about that there. He hasn't had much of anything to throw to since he's been in Philadelphia, really since that 2017 season where everyone's been hurt since then. But I am rooting for Carson Wentz because I think he's, like I said, he's been dealt a really difficult hand over these last few years with injuries, personnel, situation. I'm not a fan of Doug Peterson personally. I thought that, listen, he had a great roster and did a good job in 2017, but has really tanked as a coach since then. It's kind of reminded me of Matt Nagy after his first year in Chicago. Like, I don't know what to think of Carson Wentz at this point, and I don't think we're really going to know for a little while because I don't know if he's healthy or not.
Yeah, I agree. And you talk about the talent, and that's kind of my thing. I think he could be an average QB. And you talk about the Colts, I think with their weapons, I think they're also getting now progressing into their prime too. I mean, you talk about Michael Pittman, only a rookie. I think you see T.Y. Hilton going out of his prime basically. And I think it's going to probably take some time before that offense really starts getting going. And I don't know if Carson Wentz is that guy for them to lead them. That defense is so good. And I mean, Frank Reich looks like he's, obviously a good coach and knows what he's doing. I mean, to me, that's just the best spot for him. And I just can't see any other team going to get him. I mean, I was talking about the Bears and how Jameis Winston would be stupid to go there. Like, if they get another just rehashed quarterback, I mean, if I was a Bears fan, I'd be so mad. I mean, because they're just seeing what rehashed quarterback sticks at this point. I mean, I don't see Wentz going there. So I don't know. That Carson Wentz is just a weird situation because he was so good, and then just fell off.
It's unfortunate, but that's a situation that he faces, and we'll see what ends up happening. A lot of quarterback potential movement this offseason. One destination we didn't really talk about was New England, perhaps. I mean, that
would be interesting.
Where we have no idea what Bill Belichick wants to do with the quarterback position there, and I have my doubts Cam Newton returns. I have my doubts that Jarrett Stidham is viewed as the guy there. So we'll see what ends up happening. A lot of potential destinations, a lot of potential outcomes for a bunch of these quarterbacks. We got about 20 minutes left here on One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. We got our final segment coming up. All three of us, our favorite prop bets, our favorite Super Bowl traditions. There will be lots of them. There's no doubt about it. And then we will close out the show with our picks for what will happen at 6 o'clock on Sunday. Wrapping things up here. Stick with us on 90.7 FM, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. We appreciate you being with us for over 2.5 hours now, and we hope you stay with us for the final stretch. We'll be back in a moment.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
closing things out here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Jackson Heil, Andrew Gulata, Kayla Wenzel here with you, and it's time. We're back to our Super Bowl discussion. This should be a fun conversation because I'm always curious to hear what people enjoy most about the Super Bowl, because it's not just a sporting event. I mean, this is a global event, and specifically, obviously, in America, it's huge, but Super Bowl is a global event for people. Like, they love to watch this game for some reason. They don't really care about football for a lot of the season, but then once the big game comes, things start to switch. So I'm curious to hear. We're going to go through our favorite prop bets, traditions, boxes, whatever you guys want to do. Andrew, I'll start with you, then we'll go to Kayla, and then we'll circle back to me. But Andrew, what's your favorite part about the Super Bowl in terms of that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big commercials person, so I always love to see that. I mean, that's something that I think beyond the game is something that I enjoy. I mean, the prop bets are always fun. I mean, I feel like this year there are a lot of pretty fun ones. I mean, I was talking about in the open how the coin flip one I just don't get. Like, why would someone do that? I like you said you'd tell me, so I can't wait to hear that explanation, because I just don't understand when you look at everything else. Like, basically the 50-50. I don't know why you wouldn't just play a slot machine at that point, but that's just kind of how I feel. But we were talking about this before, the MVP, like who's he going to first refer to in the speech? I think that's a really fun one. And then I think one that's just the sign of the times. They said how many masks people in commercials will be wearing masks, which I thought was pretty interesting. So those were the ones that I was like, oh, those are pretty cool. And traditions at the Super Bowl, I don't really have that many traditions. I usually just watch it with my family, usually like a party. Not this year, of course, but again, I mean, usually just in my family room. And I got to say this one thing. I think my family room is cursed. I will say that because since the Saints Super Bowl, which that's how it goes back to the Super Bowl. So the Saints won the Super Bowl in 2009. That was the first championship game I've watched in there, because I'm a Mets fan. I wasn't really they didn't make the championship since I've been born, besides 2015. So the Saints win. I go 1-0. Then the Saints 2010, the Marshawn Lynch run. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. But like, we won the Super Bowl last year. It's all good. They lose in 2011. Then the Knicks lost with that Carmelo Anthony team. That was a fun team that I was upset that team lost. Then the Mets lose the World Series, and like every game was like just like craziness how they lost. It would walk-off home runs, and you had the whole thing with Harvey, how we collapsed that. And then just these last few Saints runs where you get the Minnesota Miracle, the Nola no call. I'm like, I must be doing something wrong, because I think it's haunted.
I think you just root for terrible sports teams.
That's true.
Really
That's
terrible.
True.
And listen, not as bad as me, because I've been through it worse. I mean, you look at my wall right now. I mean, I'm a diehard Rangers fan. Like, you can see around the room. We got the fan there. We got the Jackson Heil jersey over there too behind me. You got the Orioles plaque right here, the fat head. Like, life is miserable for me as a sports fan. I think you just like, you got a taste of winning early and just assume winning.
No, but like, my
that.
teams get into the playoffs, and then just like you're like riding high, and then they just disappoint you. I don't know what's
Yeah,
worse.
well, the Rangers was like that for me too. The Rangers got to the playoffs almost every year, but couldn't finish the job. So I don't know if it's a living room curse or a family room curse, but like it's just the life of a sports fan. You got a taste of winning early, and you were a little spoiled in the year of 2009.
You're right.
So I don't know if it's just curse. I think it just it happens. But Kayla, to you, favorite sports traditions, prop bets. What's your favorite thing about Super Bowl Sunday?
Yeah, I love Super Bowl Sunday. Definitely a commercial person, especially before I actually cared about the game. I really loved the commercial, and I loved the halftime show. I always watch the halftime show.
Really? Okay.
They're usually terrible, but I always watch them. So the weekend, I'll be interested to see how he does. My favorite prop bets, I don't actually bet, but this one I was like looking it up, and I thought it was really funny because last year Andy Reid ate a burger when they celebrated the Super Bowl, and this one's like a bet if he will be eating a burger again at the end of the game.
See, like this is stuff that's just like you don't find this anywhere else. Like you got to be sick to think of this type of stuff. Like, who's the odds makers out there that are saying, let's actually put odds on Andy Reid eating a cheeseburger and let's make money off this? Like, that's insane to me. But like, it's pretty wild how it happens. Personally, my favorite traditions. I love doing the boxes each year. I think it's fascinating. just like you're assigned random boxes, obviously, and they write the numbers afterwards randomly, and you're just attached to that the rest of the game. Like you're just begging for teams to score in that regard, so you win a lot of money. But in terms of like traditions, I think the most underrated eating day of the year is the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like the amount of wings I eat is disgusting. Like I eat so many wings on Super Bowl Sunday. Honestly, anything you throw in front of me, I'll eat, to be honest. But that is probably my favorite tradition of Super Bowl Sunday. Personally, like once the game starts, I'm locked in. Like anything outside the game, like I personally hate the halftime show because I just think it's so long. I just want the game to start. I'm just like I have an addiction to sports. Like I need to constantly be watching it. So like the halftime show, I'm like I don't know who's singing. I know I obviously know the weekend is like, and I'm seeing like prop bets on like I'm looking at like what's the first song that's gonna be played, and like I recognize like 2 of the songs. There's like 8 songs list. I'm like I don't know any of these other than like
Blinding
obviously like Blinding Lights, and like there was one other song I recognize that I forget the name now, which tells you all you need to know about my passion for the weekend. But anyways, my favorite prop bets, one was mentioned by Andrew already, tails on the coin toss. And here's why. Listen, you could play the slot machine all you want. That's not fun. You're sitting like that's like when you have like the recognition of a degenerate, which you're betting on the Super Bowl though. That's like you're watching like the coin toss. Like for so many reasons, it's enjoyable to me. But like tails never fails is a quote for a reason. Like it really does never fail. And last year was the first time I ever like tested a theory. I was like, all right, let me see how this works, and I'll put down a bet on tails, and it was tails. So in my estimations, tails never fails. Anyways, we continue on. The funniest prop bet to me, and one that Andrew also mentioned that we were talking about in between segments, is who the MVP will thank first. And to me, like there's a lot of different ways you can go with this, and there's a lot of different things that have been listed out. One of them being teammates at minus 200 right now. But God and religion at plus 150 might be the lock of the year. Like my favorite thing when people win the MVP is like, listen, none of this happens without the man upstairs. I'm like, you don't even know if that exists. And listen, I'm a Catholic. Like go to Fordham. Like I'm not a hardcore like religious person. I would be the first to admit that. But like, even if you believe in God, like, you don't know if he exists up there. Like you've never seen him. You've never talked to him. Like, and you're thanking him. Like this is the first person you're thanking after the most significant accomplishment of your lifetime. You're not thanking family. You're not thanking teammates, the ones that got you there. You're thanking a potentially mythical existence that may or may not actually exist. It's fascinating to me.
Everyone does it, though.
Everyone does it. Everyone seems to do it.
I'm surprised it's not the favorite, to be honest with you.
Oh, my gosh. It really should be. And I just find it so funny. Like, I always start laughing. They're like, yeah, glory to the man upstairs. He's the one that I'm not here without him. Like what? Like that's a first thing on your mind after winning the most important thing in your life. Like, and good for these people too, because like I couldn't be that religious. It's just not in me. But that is, I think, is my favorite prop bet of the Super Bowl, and one that I just discovered too. Like I was going, like I didn't even know this was a thing until I just looked it up like about an hour ago. I had so many other things prepared, and then I saw this, and it was a boom, change of topic right there. Had to go that direction. But man, so those are our favorite prop bets. Those are our favorite traditions. Now let's get into our picks. We will start with Kayla. Bucks, give me the winner, score, and MVP as well.
All right. My winner is Kansas City Chiefs. My score is 31-24. Okay. And then my MVP is Patrick Mahomes.
Okay. Any logic behind it you want to share with us, or? I
think that Andy Reid has a better offense. That's just what I think. I think that he is able to adjust well in the middle of a game. I think that he's going to be able to read the Bucs defense, which we've talked about is really good. But I think that Andy Reid is really good at just making on-the-fly calls and coming up with the best solutions to these problems. And so I think that I see Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes' talent combined. I think that they are going to emerge victorious over the Bucs.
Okay, so we have one Chiefs pick already. Kayla going to Chiefs, 31-24, Mahomes MVP. Andrew, what do you got?
I'm not betting against Patrick Mahomes ever until something else happens. So I'll take the Chiefs. I mean, I even picked Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs over the Saints. So you know that I will live by that for the rest. Until Patrick Mahomes probably doesn't play anymore, I'll be taking the Chiefs. So I'll take them. I'll go 34-24. I think they're going to win by double digits. I think the Chiefs are the better team. I think they're going to show it. And I think Brady throws 2 picks in this game. I think they're able to take advantage of it. I think Tyrann Mathieu gets a pick. The Honey Badger is going to get one. I just feel it. I feel like 10 points. And the way this Chiefs team's playing, I mean, I always say this. It feels like the Chiefs, even if they're losing, they always feel like they're in control of the game. Like they never feel like they're actually going to lose. And to me right now, they're just dominant, and now continue. And MVP Patrick Mahomes, just to put that in there.
I mean, listen, you have to pick the winning quarterback. Like you pretty much have an obligation to, especially when it's Brady and Mahomes. Like, it doesn't matter who does what. Like Tyreek Hill could go for 400 yards receiving, and it's still going to Mahomes. Like,
well, Mahomes would probably have 500 yards passing.
Yes, exactly. Like it doesn't matter. Like Breeland could have 3 pick sixes.
Yeah.
Mahomes could throw 3 picks, and he's probably going to be the MVP if the Chiefs win. Not that would ever happen, but anyway. So we got 2 Chiefs picks. On to me. Here's what I'll say about this. I think it's insane to bet against Tom Brady. I really do. The guy has an aura around him, and he is basically a mythical creature when it comes to winning. Like, this dude does it, and he's the greatest of all time for a reason. Like, the fact that he's on the verge of title number 7 is incredible in its own right. With all of this said, it's crazy to bet against Tom Brady, but you got to be a raging lunatic to bet against Patrick Mahomes, because the talent is unbelievable. The surrounding pieces is incredible. And I think that advantage goes to Kansas City for a few reasons. One being that they have been there recently and done it. You're talking about Brady, obviously we know has been there, but you have a Bucs team also that really, a lot of them are going to be playing in their first Super Bowl too. So there's a little bit of a lack of experience here, but at the same time, I think Mahomes' ability to make plays in the pocket and plays outside the pocket, more importantly, is going to be what puts Kansas City over the top. Because listen, we talked so much about getting edge pressure from Shaq Barrett, and Jason Pierre-Paul is going to be critical in this game. Especially with Kansas City without their 2 starting offensive tackles, especially Eric Fisher being the big one. But I look at Kansas City right now, I look at Mahomes, and I see a team that's unstoppable right now. I don't care what you throw at them. I thought the Bills were probably the best chance to beat them. And after the first few minutes of that game, when they went down 9-0, they steamrolled them. The Chiefs steamrolled the Bills after that. And we're in, really, like you said, even when they were losing, you felt like they were in control the entire game. So it's so hard to pick against this team.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew, I'll let you make your comment in a sec, but Kansas City, 31-21 was my final. We all have some relatively similar score lines, and I think for a good reason. And then, like I said, if you're picking the Chiefs to win and anyone else other than Mahomes is your MVP, you're just doing yourself a disservice, because Mahomes is probably going to be the reason they end up winning this football game. So I'm going with that.
The only time that the Chiefs, I didn't felt like it was like getting shaky was that Browns game. That was the shot. I think that was your chance. Just this once in a blue moon type scenario. Patrick Mahomes gets out, and like you had your chance. I mean, the Browns have really. That's the one that they're going to be shaking their head like, oh, we had a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes, because that's probably going to be your only shot. I mean, like just knocking him out due to injury. And that whole play with the touchback, that's just going to be coming back to haunt them. I think when you talk about this run here for the Chiefs, the only close call that I think they're going to have is against that Browns game.
It takes a moment like that. Like it seems like every time every time a team wins the Super Bowl, you have that moment where like it's the close call, but you got to be able to survive. And the Chiefs did just that. They survived the tough call. I actually said at the time that I thought Cleveland would be their toughest matchup. Not the best team they play, because I think Buffalo is better, but I think it's the toughest matchup for them because the way to beat Patrick Mahomes, and this is going to be, I think, the biggest key offensively for Tampa Bay on Sunday, or today, I should say, is the run game. If you can take the ball and keep it out of Mahomes' hands, you can win and beat them. And it's what San Francisco did in the first half and really through 3 quarters against them, and that's why they had a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl last year. But if you can take the ball out of Mahomes' hands, you will have a chance to win this game. And for that, I don't think that they'll be able to run the ball well enough to do that in this game, just because I don't know if Bruce Arians is dedicated enough to grounding and pounding this entire game, especially because he doesn't seem like he has a running back that he trusts at this point because he bounced back between Fournette, Ronald Jones, and whatnot. But I think this is going to be very interesting. I do want to acknowledge Alex Wolves for a second because he has been on the Bucs bandwagon the entire time, our great producer. And Alex, I know they can't hear you, but tell me your pick so I can echo it real quick. 35-31 Bucs. Who's your MVP?
Oh,
and the old shocking Tom Brady MVP pick. But like you said, I am with you there. I think it's crazy to pick against any quarterback to win the MVP. But if there's one thing I'm hoping for, I just want a competitive game. I think we're all rooting for that. I want good food. I want my prop bets to hit. Quickly, what color we think the Gatorade is on the winning?
Has to be
Andy
red.
Reid, I guess.
Has to be red.
Orange.
Really?
Okay, red or
See,
orange.
I was
Okay.
thinking orange too.
Okay.
Because I was actually reading something. Well,
Is
not
it usually
reading,
orange?
Usually
No,
orange.
but the Chiefs' mindset has been run it back, do everything the same, don't
Sure
change
is.
everything. And last year, when they won, it was
It was
orange Gatorade. So I think it's going to be orange, personally. But again,
I like that
we
theory.
will see what happens. That is my theory, yes, of course. But again, I think it should be an interesting game. Guys, it's been a great show. Been a lot of fun. Talked about a lot of different things. I think it was nice and refreshing to talk about things other than the Super Bowl because I think people are sick of the storylines at this point. But it's been a great show. Andrew, Kayla, any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
My last thing is that I'll say if the Bucs do win, I think Brady won't win the MVP. I think it'll be someone else, a defensive player probably that is able to pick off Mahomes a few times. And I think it'll be someone outside of Tom Brady. As I think the way that the Bucs win this game is they suffocate Mahomes and they are able to score 27 points and they win like 27-24. I think that's the way you do it. And I feel like it's going to come down to a defensive play that the Bucs have to make, not an offensive play.
Interesting.
I have one quick thing. I think that Andy. Okay, ready? Doug Peterson is a student of Andy Reid. The Eagles beat the Patriots. They beat Tom Brady. Therefore, Andy Reid can beat Tom Brady.
I like it. I like where a thought process. My final thought before we wrap up is I think I finally found someone who hates Tom Brady more than myself, and that's the one and only Andrew Gullotta. So congratulations on maybe knocking me off that perch. But
we'll see how long he plays for the Bucs. I think that's the thing, right?
Guys, it's been a great show. And once again, from Kayla Wenzel doing headlines, Andrew Gullotta, our host, our great producer, Alex Wolves. I'm Jackson Heil. Thanks to our guests today, who were terrific. Alex Kennedy of basketballnews.com and Zach Braziller of the New York Post, giving us some excellent content throughout the show. Once again, One on One is a production of WFUV Sports.